The Boneharrow Steppes were never supposed to whisper my name, yet the first night I crossed their ragged threshold, the wind dragged its fingers across the sand and hissed a sound so close to my own that I froze mid-stride. I told myself it was imagined. I told myself many things back then, trying to muffle the parts of me that sensed what lay beneath the pale dunes. But the steppes have a way of unmaking lies. They strip a person down to whatever truth still clings to their bones. I had come alone, though no one with sense crossed the Boneharrow without companions, without guides, without final goodbyes. I told no one I was leaving, not because I feared they'd try to stop me, but because some part of me already felt too far away from them, as though I had stepped into a place that had been waiting for me long before my feet ever touched its sand. The sky was a shade of bruised purple that night, the kind of color that makes you think of fading wounds. I followed the line of dead thorn trees that marked the outskirts of the steppes, their brittle branches clawing upward like hands desperate to grasp some passing salvation. The moon, thin as a sliver of bone, offered little guidance. I didn't need it. The wind was enough. It curled around me in slow spirals, and with each step deeper into the dunes, the air grew colder, thinner, as though the land itself had been drained of warmth over centuries. I'd heard the tales, of course, everyone had. Stories of the sky-scraping spirits, the risen nomads whose bones carried the memory of ancient roaming. They were said to dance in the upper air, trailing strands of ghost light that cut fleeting lines across the heavens. Some believed these patterns foretold war, famine, or the fate of tribes long gone. Others said they were unfinished stories, written by hands that no longer lived but could not rest. I hadn't come for stories. I'd come for a truth that I hoped would swallow me whole before it told me anything at all. The first night passed without sleep. The wind kept brushing against my tent, making the canvas ripple as though something were stroking its surface from the outside. I left a lantern lit, the weak flame trembling in the cold air. Its glow threw shifting shadows around me, and more than once I thought I saw a face forming along the tent wall, hollow eyes, long cracked cheekbones, lips pulled back in a grin that was too wide, too knowing. But every time I yanked the flap open, I saw only the dunes under the pale moonlight, smooth and undisturbed. It was close to dawn when the scraping began. A faint, gritty sound at first, like claws dragging lightly across stone. Then louder, then closer. I clutched the knife at my side, small, useless, but grounding in a way nothing else was, and pressed my ear to the cold canvas. The scraping came from just outside, circling my tent in slow, deliberate arcs, as though whatever made the sound was drawing a boundary around me. I didn't breathe, didn't dare. Only when the sky began to pale with the first hints of morning did the sound fade. When I finally stepped outside, the sand around my tent bore strange marks. Long, winding grooves forming a ring so perfect I knew no human hand could have made it. The wind had no part in this. The dunes weren't capable of such shapes. Something else had been there. I packed quickly and kept walking. The Boneharrow Steppes stretched endlessly before me, flat in some places and rising sharply in others, like the backs of sleeping beasts. The sun brought no comfort. It burned overhead with a bleached, merciless heat, but the cold that clung to the sands beneath my feet didn't fade. I walked for hours, perhaps longer. Time works strangely here. The air tasted stale, as though the entire land had exhaled its last breath long before I arrived. It was near midday when I saw the first bones. Not human, not entirely animal. They jutted from a half-collapsed dune, bleached and fused in impossible ways. Ribs grown into wings that could never have flown, vertebrae twisted in spirals that defied anatomy. A skull rested near the base of the structure, elongated and carved with symbols that almost resembled writing. Almost. The wind hummed low around them, carrying a faint, hollow melody. My skin crawled. I reached out without thinking, brushing my fingers against the nearest bone. The world blinked. For a moment, just a sliver of a second. I wasn't on the steppes but somewhere darker, deeper, surrounded by figures that rose and fell like smoke given skeletal form. They floated above ground, their joints bending too gracefully, their skulls hollowed by time, trailing shimmering threads of pale blue light that curled into the air above them. These threads met the darkness overhead, carving lines through nothingness, forming shapes I could barely comprehend. Spirals that broke apart, symbols that felt like memories I had never lived, images that flitted away as soon as they sharpened. One of the spirits turned its head toward me. I didn't see eyes. I saw emptiness, endless and waiting. The vision snapped, and I stumbled back, nearly falling into the sand. The bones in the dune were still, lifeless, silent. My heart thrashed against my ribs as though trying to escape. I told myself I imagined it, but the steps were already peeling back my lies again, stripping them away grain by grain. By the time the sun dipped low, the horizon darkening to a deep, bruised red, I had walked far enough that my legs trembled beneath me. I made camp beside a cluster of stones that formed a rough crescent shape, ancient markers from tribes long forgotten. I built a small fire, though the flames barely seemed to hold their shape in the flickering wind. The night air thickened as darkness grew, heavy with something unspoken. I didn't expect to sleep, and yet I must have drifted, because I woke with a start to the feeling of something tugging at my hair. I bolted upright, sand spraying, knife in hand, but there was nothing. Only the wind, cold as the breath of a buried corpse, curling around me. The night sky above was deeper and darker than any I had seen before, its stars sharper, crueler, as though they were watching me rather than burning bright on their own. Then I saw them. High above the dunes, brushing the very edge of the sky, a line of pale blue threads shimmered faintly. They twisted in slow, looping arcs, like ribbons caught in an upper wind that didn't touch the earth. At first I thought it was some trick of the light, but then more appeared, and more, rising from the far horizon like silent flames. The spirits. Their forms were faint, translucent, as if carved from fog and moonlight. Skeletal frames hung loosely within the vapor of their bodies, drifting as though carried by currents only they could feel. They rose from the dunes in staggering numbers, each trailing a long ribbon of shimmering light that left glowing patterns behind them. The ribbons carved symbols across the sky, layered, overlapping, shifting like a language written faster than the eye could follow. And all of them were moving in the same direction, toward the center of the Boneharrow Steppes, toward where I was heading. I should have felt fear clawing up my throat, terror so sharp it would paralyze me. But a strange calm washed over me instead. Not safety, no, never safety, but a pull, deep and insistent, as though something here recognized me. Their skulls tilted downward in slow, synchronized motion. They were looking at me. The air thickened. A low vibration threaded through the dunes, rattling my bones. The spirit's ribbons spiraled downward in sudden, sharper movements, slicing through the air like blades. The dunes around me trembled, small avalanches slipping down their sides. My heart hammered. This wasn't the calm of belonging. It was the calm before being devoured. The sky suddenly tore with a sound like cracking ice, and the spirits vanished, snuffed out like candle flames. Darkness swallowed the world again. I remained frozen for long minutes, breath tight in my throat, every muscle straining for the next sign of movement. But the sky was empty, still, as though nothing had been there at all. Sleep never returned. When dawn finally crept across the horizon, painting the dunes in streaks of rust and gold, I resumed walking. My steps grew weaker with each mile. I hadn't eaten since I entered the steppes. Hunger gnawed at my stomach, but the thought of food seemed wrong, foreign, as though my body had forgotten why it needed it. Water tasted strange too, thin and metallic. But I drank. I had to. Hours passed. The wind carried whispers now, faint and incomprehensible, curling between grains of sand like threads of memory. I tried to ignore them, tried to focus on the horizon, where the land rose in a jagged ridge. Something waited there. A structure so faint I wasn't sure it was real, a dark silhouette that pulsed subtly like a heartbeat. I walked toward it. The sun sank again, slow and deliberate, casting long shadows that stretched across the steppes. Every shadow seemed too sharp, too deliberate, like something was hiding within them. By the time I reached the ridge, night had fallen once more, and I saw the ruins. They rose from the sand like broken teeth, jagged and pale, carved with symbols that glowed faintly when the moonlight struck them. The air here felt thick, almost viscous. Each breath carried the scent of ancient smoke and something else, something sweet and rotten, like decay dressed in perfume. I stepped between two massive stone pillars, their surfaces carved with spirals that twisted in ways that hurt to look at. My fingers brushed one, and a shiver climbed my spine, cold and electric. The ground trembled beneath my feet. From the corner of my eye, a flicker of blue light. I turned, and they were there again. Not in the sky this time, on the ground, watching me. Their skeletal forms floated inches above the sand. Their bones, wrapped in thin layers of spectral mist. Their limbs elongated and bent at impossible angles, and their skulls were adorned with faded etchings, marks of old tribes long consumed by the steppes. The ribbons they once trailed in the sky now curled around their bodies like serpents, hissing with soft, mournful light. One drifted closer. Its skull hovered only feet from my face. I saw cracks running along the bone, patterns carved through its forehead, symbols I almost recognized. The ribbon coiled around me, brushing my cheek with a cold so sharp it felt like being cut. The spirit leaned in, its jaw unhinged, and it whispered my name. I stumbled backward, tasting dust and fear at the same time. The whisper was no longer just sound. It pressed into my skull, wrapping around my thoughts like smoke through bone. It spoke not in words I understood but in memory, in something primal, old, and hungry. My name rolled over the dunes again, each repetition heavier, dragging the air around me like a coffin lid sliding shut. I forced my legs to move, though every step felt like I was wading through molasses. The spirit drifted closer, the ribbons around its body snaking outward, reaching, teasing, caressing. The closer it came, the sharper the cold became. I felt it in my chest, in my lungs, in the marrow of my bones. Every breath burned. Every heartbeat throbbed like a drum warning of doom. I had never known fear like this. It was not just fear of death. It was fear of being remembered when no one else could remember, fear of being carved into the endless patterns of the steppes, a skeleton among skeletons. I broke into a run. Sand sprayed in all directions, but the dunes themselves seemed to bend against me, slopes rising to slow me down. The ruins stretched endlessly to either side, pillars and stones moving subtly as if breathing. I could hear faint scraping beneath my boots, whispers curling into the air. I did not look back. I dared not. The ribbon snaked along the sand behind me, flashing pale light across the grains, and I knew it could touch me at any moment if it wanted. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time in the Boneharrow Steppes had its own cruel rhythm. Night clung tightly, unyielding, and the wind grew colder still. I wanted to scream, but my throat refused. The moon slid behind clouds like an eye closing, and then I stumbled into the hollow. The hollow was not a hollow at all but a depression in the sand, shaped too perfectly to be natural. Stones and bones lay scattered along the edge, more of them than I had seen anywhere else. Some were human, some not, fused together in grotesque mosaics. I felt drawn to them. Something inside me ached, an old memory, though I could not place it, though I had never seen this place before. A voice hissed behind me, a whisper that carried not through ears but through the very marrow of my spine. See, watch, learn. I sank to my knees, paralyzed partly by fear, partly by curiosity I could not deny. The sand beneath my hands was warm and alive, moving slightly, as though breathing with the pulse of the steppes. Above me, the sky split open again. Threads of pale blue light descended, curling and unspooling, weaving patterns into the sand itself. The spirits returned. Not hundreds, not thousands, but countless. They brushed against one another in the air, trailing light like a web, moving with terrible grace. And I realized they were writing something, not in the sky this time, but into the dunes, into the bones, into me. The patterns formed shapes I recognized subconsciously, faces of ancestors I had never met, landscapes that existed only in dreams, symbols that resonated in a way my mind could feel but not name. My knees pressed into sand as ribbons brushed against my fingers, leaving faint burn marks. I could feel my memories intertwining with theirs, pulling threads of my mind into theirs, threading me into the Boneharrow itself. Then one of them landed directly before me. Its skull tilted downwards, elongated jaw opening slowly. I could see inside, the hollow dark orbit shining faintly with pale light. Its ribbon reached out, coiling around my wrist with a delicate yet unyielding pressure. It tugged, and my body moved as if of its own accord. I rose, following without thinking, as if the spirits were no longer behind me but inside me, guiding my steps. The hollow expanded into a canyon, jagged cliffs rising on either side, etched with faces and symbols. The air grew thin, and the cold burned deeper. I could hear scraping everywhere now. Not a single sound but a chorus, hundreds of claws on stone, sand, and air itself. We walked like this for what felt like an eternity. The steps twisted around us, dunes rising impossibly high, shapes folding over themselves in impossible geometries. Occasionally, I glimpsed figures in the distance, trailing ribbons, drifting, waiting, watching, and each time one would come closer, moving with the same silent intent. Their presence was not threatening exactly but absolute. To resist was impossible. To flee was meaningless. The steps had me and they would not let go. Eventually, we reached the center. It was a plain, wide and flat, yet unlike any plain I had seen before. The ground pulsed under the pale light, like the land itself was breathing. Bones jutted from the sand in intricate lattices, fused into arches, towers, spirals that seemed to reach toward the sky even as they anchored the earth. And above it, the sky was alive with ribbons, twisting and weaving in patterns too fast for the eye to follow. It was beautiful, terrifying, overwhelming, and I realized I was not alone in the plain. At its center stood a figure taller than any spirit I had seen, larger, more solid, though it shimmered with the same ghostly light. Its skull was vast, etched with symbols that shifted and twisted as I looked at them, as though they were alive. Ribbons of light extended from its form, connecting to every other spirit in the steppes, linking them in a network of faint energy. It radiated power, and I felt my own pulse sync with it, trembling in fear, awe, and recognition. The figure spoke, not in words but in thought, in echoes that entered my mind. It pulled at memories I did not know I had, ancient images of nomads riding endless dunes, of bones being laid to sky, of spirits lifting to carve the heavens. You are chosen. You belong. You will see what we see. I wanted to resist. I wanted to run, to scream, to bury my head in sand and never leave. But the steppes would not let me. One of the ribbons wrapped around my chest, pressing, and suddenly I was weightless, lifted above the dunes. The other spirits followed, rising with me. And as we climbed, the sky itself seemed to stretch, the ribbons carving infinite patterns into clouds that were not clouds, into darkness that was not darkness. I saw the history of the Boneharrow Steppes, of the nomads who had lived and died there. I saw the wars, the betrayals, the rituals, the sacrifices. I saw how every spirit was once human, once flesh and blood, now rising on wind and memory. And I understood, with a clarity that almost broke me, the steppes did not merely remember. They rewrote. They claimed what had been, and what would be, and folded it into the endless sky. I screamed, not with my mouth, but with my mind. The figure above me bent slightly, and I saw an expression on its face, though it was more impression than reality, and it seemed amused. Then it leaned forward, closer, and the ribbons wrapped around me tightened, pulling me into a spiral of blue light, a vortex of memories, echoes, and bones. The air burned, the wind screamed, the stars fragmented into lines, streaks, arcs of impossible geometry. I could feel myself unmaking, and then silence. I floated above the dunes, alone. The ribbons had vanished, the spirits gone. Only the faint scent of ancient bones lingered in the air, and the sky was empty, save for the faint trace of a bruise-colored dawn on the horizon. I was alive. Somehow, impossibly, I was alive. But I was not the same. I could feel the patterns of the Boneharrow etched into my own bones, in the hollows of my mind. I could hear whispers when I closed my eyes, feel the pull of ribbons brushing my skin, see faint shadows in every movement of sand and air. I staggered forward, and for the first time in days, I walked alone. The steps stretched endlessly before me, silent but waiting. And I knew with absolute certainty, that I would return, that I would not leave, that the steps had not yet finished with me. And somewhere above, threads of pale blue began to curl in the wind again, waiting for the next story to carve, the next skeleton to rise, the next soul to remember what had been and what could never die. The days passed with no clear line between them. Time warped here in the Boneharrow Steppes. It was as though the sun and the moon had forgotten their places in the sky, as though the land itself bent the rules of existence. There was no hunger here, no thirst, but there was always a pull, a tug at the edges of my mind, like invisible strings drawing me further into the dunes. And the deeper I went, the more I felt it, the pressure, the weight of something ancient and cold that watched from beyond the horizon, waiting. I couldn't say how long I had walked. The sky had gone from blue to deep violet to pitch black again, and the wind never ceased its howling hum. It never stopped whispering, not in a way I could understand, but in a way that made the bones in my chest ache, that made the hair on the back of my neck rise. It was as though the very air itself carried the weight of ancient knowledge, of secrets better left buried. Every now and then, I saw them again, the spirits, the skeletal forms, glowing faintly with their ribbons of light, trailing across the horizon like stars caught in a slow spiral. They did not approach me anymore. They simply existed, drifting in and out of the dunes, moving along the same winding paths they always had, as though they were waiting for something, or someone. But they were not mine to touch, not mine to speak to, not mine to understand. I found myself walking without thinking, my feet leading me deeper into the heart of the steppes. It was as if the land was pulling me in, shaping my steps like it had shaped the bones that littered the ground. The sand had begun to take on a strange texture. It no longer felt like sand at all, but something more solid, more deliberate. It was the bones again, buried beneath the surface. They had always been there, but now they were closer, pressing against the earth from below, whispering their endless song. I stopped when I saw the first sign of something different. At first, I thought it was another ruin, another relic of some forgotten people long swallowed by the desert. But as I drew closer, the shape became clearer. It was a structure, not of bone, but of stone. A tower, or at least what was left of one. The walls were cracked, weathered by millennia of wind and time, but they were undeniably made of stone. The doorframe, though half sunken into the sand, still stood tall, as if the doorway had once been a threshold between worlds. Something about it called to me. I approached slowly, wary but drawn to it with an irresistible force. The wind had calmed as I neared, the usual hum muted as if the land itself was holding its breath. The tower loomed, its jagged edges sharp against the sky, and the sand around it seemed to writhe and shift, like the bones of something long dead trying to claw their way out of the earth. I placed my hand on the stone, and immediately, a jolt of energy shot through me. It wasn't pain, exactly, but something akin to it. A surge that felt like the land itself was recognizing my touch, as if I had disturbed a deep slumber. The tower groaned in response, a low, deep vibration that rattled the stones around me. Then, a voice. It wasn't a voice in the sense that it used words, but it was unmistakable. It was the land speaking, the wind, the bones, the very marrow of the earth. You have found it. You have found the heart. I recoiled, stumbling back, but the voice wasn't gone. It echoed inside my skull, and I felt the pressure, a weight at the back of my eyes, as if the entire universe was trying to press itself into my mind. It didn't hurt, no, it was worse than that. It was too much. It was the knowledge of everything and nothing all at once. An endless ocean of memories that did not belong to me but to something older, something that had always been here, buried in the desert sands. And then, as quickly as it came, the pressure lifted. The voice retreated into the dunes, leaving behind only the lingering vibration in my bones. I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, trying to gather myself, trying to push away the flood of thoughts that wasn't mine. But the tower beckoned again, its cold stone pulling at my fingertips, the doorframe opening wider. It was a test, I realized. The steps were testing me, pushing me to the edge of something that I wasn't ready to understand. But I didn't have a choice. Not anymore. I stepped inside. The air in the tower was colder than the desert night, and the darkness inside was nearly absolute. But the moment I crossed the threshold, the stone beneath my feet seemed to pulse with a faint light, lighting my way. The tower's interior was a hollow shell, with walls covered in carvings, symbols, markings, lines that twisted in on themselves in endless loops. Some of them were familiar, but most were alien, shapes I couldn't comprehend. Yet they felt old, like something from a dream long forgotten. I walked further in, feeling the walls with my hands as I moved. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of decay lingered faintly in the corners. But there was no sign of life, not even the faintest trace of the spirits I had seen outside. Only the stone, the carvings, and the oppressive silence. Then I found it. In the center of the tower, beneath the floor, there was an altar. It wasn't stone like the rest of the tower, but made of bone. The bones of something massive, something beyond comprehension. They were fused together in an intricate pattern, a twisting sculpture that seemed to spiral downward into the earth itself. And atop it, resting on the bone structure, was a large, hollowed-out skull. It was human, but not like any skull I had seen before. The bones were brittle and cracked, weathered by time, but they still held an unsettling sense of power. And it was not empty. Inside the skull was a glowing, pale blue light, swirling and pulsing with a life of its own. The ribbon of light that the spirits used, the same one I had seen in the air, seemed to emanate from within the skull, curling and spiraling in on itself, as though feeding off something that was trapped there. The moment I gazed into the skull, I felt it again, the presence of the land, of the steppes, pressing in on me. This time the weight was unbearable. The tower, the bones, the light, they all converged, pulling me toward the altar, drawing me closer to the glowing skull. It was a lure, a siren song that beckoned me with an irresistible force. The voice returned. You seek knowledge. You seek answers. But the price is steep. Are you willing to pay it? The question hung in the air, suffocating in its silence. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to run, to leave the tower and the steppes behind, to escape this place before it consumed me entirely. But another part, one that had been growing inside me since the moment I stepped into the steppes, felt a deep, insatiable pull. I had come here for a reason, and I would never leave until I had found it. I reached out. The moment my fingers brushed the skull, everything changed. The air twisted around me, the ground beneath my feet cracked, and the tower seemed to collapse inward. The bones beneath the altar shifted, grinding against one another with a sound like the breaking of the world. The blue light flared brighter, expanding outward, and I felt it, deep within my chest. An understanding, an ancient memory that had been buried for eons. I saw the steppes as they once were, teeming with life, with nomads riding the dunes under a sun that was not yet dead. I saw the spirits, the twisted, ethereal beings that rose from the bones of those who had died here. I saw the endless loop, the cycle of death and rebirth, of remembrance and erasure. And in that moment I knew I was a part of it. The land had claimed me, not as an outsider but as one of its own. I was no longer just a wanderer. I was another thread in the web, another story waiting to be written, another skeleton waiting to rise and carve the sky. I closed my eyes, letting the light consume me. When I opened my eyes, everything was different. The world had fractured and then reassembled itself in strange new shapes. The tower was gone, replaced by the vast expanse of the Boneharrow Steppes stretching out before me. The sand no longer ordinary but alive, twisting and shifting with its own rhythms. The dunes seemed to breathe, rising and falling in slow, rhythmic undulations, like the chest of some great beast stirring in its sleep. I could feel it now, the pulse of the land, the ancient heartbeat that throbbed beneath the surface, the eternal rhythm that had shaped this place long before I had ever set foot upon it. It was no longer distant, no longer something that belonged to the bones and the spirits alone. It was inside me now, in my blood, in my breath, in my very soul. The wind had stopped howling, replaced by a strange stillness, a quiet that hummed beneath the surface. There was no more voice, no more tugging pull, no more need for answers. The knowledge had already seeped into me, beyond thought, beyond understanding. I knew it now as if I had always known it. The steps were eternal. I had become part of them. I stood there, unmoving, my feet sinking slightly into the sand, the coolness of the earth pressing against the soles of my boots. The sky had darkened again, the stars twinkling with a clarity I had never seen before. It was as though the universe itself had become clearer, sharper, more real, and the ribbons of pale blue light were not just spiraling above the dunes now. They were inside me, threading through my chest, wrapping around my limbs, pulling me toward the horizon. I didn't understand it, but I didn't need to. I could feel the presence of the spirits again, though they were no longer the distant, fleeting figures I had seen from afar. Now, I could see them clearly, standing at the edges of the dunes, their skeletal forms glowing faintly against the dark backdrop of the sky. Their bones moved in strange, jerky motions, like broken marionettes, but their movements were deliberate, guided by the same unseen force that bound the steps together. They were watching me, waiting for something. I didn't know what, but I understood, too, that I was not alone. In the distance, I saw shapes moving across the horizon. Figures, cloaked in darkness, their forms indistinct but there, always there, walking in slow procession across the land. And I knew they were the ones who had walked the steps before me, the ones who had died here, had become part of it, had become the land itself. They were part of the endless cycle of life and death, memory and forgetting. And in their eyes, those hollow, empty eyes, they carried everything the land had seen, everything it had remembered, everything it would never let go. One of the spirits stepped forward, its translucent body drifting toward me with an eerie grace. I didn't move. I couldn't move. It was not fear that rooted me to the spot, but something else. Something ancient, something deep that had taken hold of me and would not let go. The spirit's skull turned toward me, its hollow gaze locking with mine. I felt the cold pressure in my chest, like ice sliding into my veins, and then, its voice. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense, no more than a thought or a feeling, but it was unmistakable. You have become one of us. I wanted to speak, to ask what that meant, but no words came. It didn't matter. I felt it. I felt the truth of it in every fiber of my being. I was one of them now, connected to the spirits, bound to the land. I could feel their ancient memories flowing through me, their knowledge slipping into my mind like threads being woven into my skin. I saw the long-dead nomads, their skeletal bodies drifting above the dunes, their ribbons of light tracing patterns across the sky. I saw the rise and fall of empires that had once called the steppes home, their cities now reduced to nothing but bones, lost to time. I saw the cycle unbroken, eternal. Life, death, memory, rebirth. The spirit before me stretched its arm, and I felt it, the pull. It wasn't a physical tug, but a mental one, deep within me, dragging me toward it. Without thinking, I moved. I stepped forward, and then I was standing in front of it, face to face, my skin cold with the same frost that clung to its bones. And then, for the first time since I had entered the steppes, the spirit spoke. You will walk the path of the ancestors now. You will rise and you will remember. And as those words rang out, I felt it, the sharp, cold truth of them. I had been chosen. I had become more than human. I had become part of the steppes, part of the land, part of the endless procession of souls that wandered its endless dunes. The world I had known was gone, erased from my memory. The land had taken what it needed, what it was owed, and it had made me one of its own. The spirit drifted backward, vanishing into the darkness. And as it did, the others stepped forward, their skeletal forms gathering around me in a slow, deliberate procession. They were waiting, and I knew what I had to do. I stepped forward, the cold sand crunching beneath my boots, and I felt the earth move beneath me, the bones shifting beneath the surface. I felt them stir, feel them wake. The spirits swirled around me, their ribbons of light trailing behind them like the threads of fate, guiding me toward the horizon. The steppes were waiting for me. I had become part of its eternal cycle, and it had become part of me. I could feel it now, the deep, resonating hum in my chest, the pulse of the land, the breath of the spirits. We were one, and together we would carve the patterns into the sky. We would write the stories of those who had lived, who had died, and who would rise again. I walked. The sky stretched wide before me, a vast canvas of shifting stars, and I saw the patterns, faint, flickering symbols, that the spirits wove in their endless dance. And as I walked, the ribbons began to rise, twisting and spiraling around me, carving shapes into the sky, carving my name into the memory of the land. I could feel it, the truth. The steppes would never forget. The bones would never rest. I was a part of it now, a part of the endless cycle. And as I walked on, the spirits followed me, their ribbons trailing behind me, their voices silent but always there, echoing in the space between the dunes, carving stories into the wind. We remember. We always remember. The wind grew stronger as I walked, swirling the sand around me in sudden, sharp gusts, pushing against me as if the land itself wanted to see how far I would go before it consumed me completely. But I didn't stop. The pull was too strong now. It wasn't just the land I felt drawing me forward. It was the spirits, too. They were with me, their pale blue ribbons twining through the air, tracing patterns I couldn't understand, but I knew them, as if they were written into my very soul. I couldn't say how far I had walked or how much time had passed. Days blurred together. The steppes had no beginning and no end, only a continuous loop of shifting dunes, broken ruins, and endless skies. The spirits were always near, always watching, though they never spoke again. Their presence was both a comfort and a constant reminder that I had crossed into something that transcended life and death. I was no longer a wanderer, no longer an outsider. I was one of them, as much a part of the land as the bones that rose from it. As I moved deeper into the steppes, the sand beneath my feet began to change. It no longer felt like mere grains. No, this sand had substance now, a texture that was more like stone than dust. The bones beneath the surface seemed to stretch outward, pressing against the earth with increasing urgency. It was as though the land was waking, stretching out its long, skeletal arms, preparing for something. I felt it in my chest, this pressure building, the weight of 1,000 years bearing down on me. And then I saw it. It appeared slowly at first, a shadow on the horizon, a dark, towering silhouette that seemed to rise from the very earth itself. It wasn't a mountain, though it was as large as one. It wasn't a ruin, though it had the appearance of something ancient, something that had been buried for eons. It was a temple, or at least what remained of one. Its walls were made of stone, though they were cracked and weathered, eroded by time and the ceaseless winds. But even in its ruined state, there was something undeniably alive about it. The air around the temple shimmered with a faint glow, a soft blue light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the land. The closer I came, the stronger the pull became. It was a force I couldn't resist, a call that reverberated through my bones. It was the heart of the steppes, the place where the land's memories were stored, where the spirits gathered to write their stories into the fabric of existence. I stepped closer to the entrance, feeling the weight of the land pressing in around me. The door was wide open, though the archway had long since crumbled. There were no markings on the stone, no symbols etched into the walls, only a cold, empty space that seemed to breathe with the same ancient rhythm that had drawn me here. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the silence deafening. I felt it before I saw it, the presence of something immense, something powerful, something older than the land itself. It was not a thing of flesh and bone, but a force, an essence, a presence that seemed to hang in the air like smoke. It was the heart of the steppes, the source of all things that lived and died here. And it was waiting for me. I stepped forward, my feet sinking into the soft stone beneath me, and the moment I crossed the threshold, the ground beneath my feet trembled. The walls of the temple shuddered, and the air grew thick with energy. The blue light from outside began to flicker, swirling around me like ribbons, faster and faster, until it seemed to fill the entire space, wrapping itself around my body, pulling me toward the center of the room. In the center, there was an altar, more of a slab of stone than anything else, but it radiated a strange, cold power. The altar was surrounded by symbols, ancient carvings that glowed faintly, as though the stone itself had once been alive, once been part of something much larger. And at the center of the altar, resting on a bed of cracked bones, was a single massive skull. It was not human. It was not animal. It was something else, something I could not name. Its surface was smooth, almost translucent, but I could feel its weight, the weight of an entire existence pressing down upon me. The ribbons of light, the same ones I had seen the spirits wear, seemed to pulse from within the skull, and I could feel them tugging at me, pulling me closer. I didn't know why, but I reached out. The moment my fingers brushed the skull, the world shattered. It was like being plunged into an endless chasm, a void that stretched on forever. The light from the skull flared bright, and I was consumed by it. The ground disappeared beneath me. The air evaporated, and I felt myself falling, spiraling through nothingness. Time ceased to exist. There were no thoughts, no memories, no awareness. There was only falling, and the sensation of being pulled deeper, farther into the heart of the steppes. And then, as quickly as it had started, everything stopped. I opened my eyes and found myself back in the temple. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, and the altar stood before me, the skull still resting at its center. But now everything was different. The stone beneath my feet was no longer just stone. It was alive, shifting with the pulse of the land. The air around me hummed with the same strange energy that had consumed me moments before, and the blue ribbons had returned, swirling around me, coiling like serpents. I could feel them now, the spirits, gathering around me, their forms clearer, their bones shimmering with the same ethereal glow. They stood in silence, watching, waiting, and I knew I had crossed the threshold. The land had claimed me fully now, and I was not just a part of the cycle anymore. I was its keeper. I had become the stewards of the steppes' memory, the ones who would carve the stories of the dead into the fabric of the land, ensuring they would never be forgotten. The cycle of life, death, and rebirth would continue, as it always had, and I would be there, a silent witness to it all, as much a part of the land as the bones beneath my feet. The spirits didn't speak again, but I felt their presence, their understanding, their acceptance. They had been waiting for me. The steppes had been waiting for me. I raised my hand, and the ribbons responded, curling around my fingers, guiding me toward the altar. The light from the skull flared again, and the voices of the past echoed in my mind, soft whispers that had once belonged to the nomads, to the ones who had walked these dunes before me. Their stories wove through me. You can replace this text with any text you wish. You can either write in this text box or paste your own text here. Try different languages and voices. Change the speed and the pitch of the voice. You can even tweak the SSML, speech synthesis markup language, to control how the different sections of the text sound. Click on SSML above to give it a try. Enjoy using text-to-speech. And then I saw it, the pattern. It was etched into the sky above me, in the swirling ribbons of light that danced like flames in the air. It wasn't a pattern I could understand with my mind, but with my soul. It was the cycle, the dance of life and death, the story that had always been told and would always be told over and over until the end of time. The figure before me raised its arm, and the ground beneath us cracked open, revealing a vast, empty chasm, a yawning abyss that stretched down into the depths of the earth. And from the chasm rose something, someone, rising from the depths of the steppes, their bones clicking together with each movement. They were one of the spirits, but they were different, more solid, more real. It was a nomad, their bones wrapped in layers of tattered cloth, their face half buried in a hood of tattered fabric. They walked slowly toward me, their skeletal form glowing with the same pale light as the spirits, but their movements were deliberate, slow. They had seen something they were meant to share. I reached out, and as my hand touched their skeletal arm, I felt it. The memory. It surged through me, crashing into my mind like a flood. I saw the nomads' life, their travels, their struggles, their death. I saw their people, their tribe, wandering the endless dunes, surviving against the elements, fighting against the forces that sought to swallow them whole. I saw the day they fell, the day they died, alone, beneath a sky that was no longer kind. But more than that, I saw their last memory, the one that had led them to rise again, the one that had carried them back to the steppes. They had died, yes, but their memory had never faded. And now they had returned to tell their story, to be remembered. And they would never be forgotten. I let the memory flow through me, absorbing it into my very being, feeling the weight of the nomad's life settle into my bones. And as I did, I realized something. The steppes didn't just remember. It needed to remember. The land had no other purpose but to store the memories of the dead, to hold them until they could rise again, to be carried forward in an endless cycle. The nomad bowed their head, and in that moment I knew. They had fulfilled their purpose. They had been remembered. They had told their story, and now they could rest. The spirit faded from my hands, disappearing into the air, leaving behind only the faintest trace of its presence. But I felt it, the truth. I was not just a part of the land. I was its voice. I was its memory, and I would carry the stories of the dead with me always. As I stood in the ruins of the temple, the wind rising once again, the sky shifting overhead, I knew my journey had only just begun. The spirits would come, one by one, rising from the bones beneath the earth, and I would be there to carry their stories, to etch their names into the fabric of the steppes. The land would never forget, and neither would I. The days that followed blurred together, an endless cycle of remembering and forgetting, of life and death interwoven in ways I couldn't fully grasp. The steppes became my world. The wind, the bones, the ancient symbols etched into the sand. It all felt like a part of me now, a reflection of something deeper, something ancient. I began walking the dunes without thinking, guided by an instinct I didn't understand, but which seemed to guide my every step. I no longer felt the pull of the outside world, the world I had once known. The city streets, the distant stars, everything that had once felt important, everything I had left behind, now seemed like a distant memory, a life that belonged to someone else. The spirits would come to me, one by one, or sometimes in groups, drifting from the horizon like shadows cast upon the earth. I would listen to their stories, allow their memories to flood my mind, to settle into my bones. I had become their keeper, their chronicler. I carried their stories like treasures, their whispers like a never-ending song that echoed in my mind. They did not speak with words. They spoke with images, with feelings, with memories that broke through the barrier of time. Each story was different, yet the same. Each spirit had lived and died, walked the dunes, and now returned to be remembered. Some were nomads, their lives full of wandering and survival, chasing the horizon under a sun that never seemed to set. Others were traders, soldiers, wanderers who had passed through the steppes in their time, their bones now part of the endless sea of the dead. But they all shared one thing in common. They had lived, and now they had become part of the land. And I was the one who would carry their stories. I had become the steppes' memory. But with each passing day, I began to feel something more, something deeper, stirring in the shadows of the dunes. The more I walked, the more I listened, the more I felt something shifting beneath the surface. It wasn't a physical thing, not a storm, not a tremor, but something deeper. It was a pressure, an awareness that the land was waiting for something. Waiting for me. It was the heart of the steppes, I realized. The ancient force that had once risen to shape this place, the one who had given it its breath, its pulse. It was calling to me, drawing me toward something hidden deep within the dunes. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of purple and orange, I felt the pull once again, stronger than before. I had been walking for hours, lost in the rhythm of the land, when I came upon a strange formation. It wasn't like the usual ruins, the scattered bones of nomads or forgotten cities. No, this was something different. The stone had been carved, shaped into an intricate pattern, a massive ring that stretched across the sand, its edges worn smooth by time and the wind. The symbols on the stones were unlike anything I had seen before, larger, more complex, interwoven in patterns that spiraled and twisted like the ribbons of light the spirits wore. As I stepped closer, I could feel it, the pressure, the energy, pulsing from the ring like a heartbeat beneath the earth. I knelt down to touch the stone, and as my fingers brushed the surface, the ground trembled beneath me. The wind stopped, the sand settled. I felt the land shift, felt something stirring deep within the ring. The air became charged with an electric energy, crackling like lightning just before a storm. I could hear a faint sound, almost like a whisper, carried on the wind. It was not the voice of the spirits this time. No, this voice was different. It was older, deeper. It was the voice of the steppes themselves, the land that had always watched, always waited. The whisper grew louder, clearer. You have found the key. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. The stone beneath my fingers seemed to hum with life, as though the very earth was alive, awake, aware. The whispering voice continued, its tone urgent, demanding. You have come to claim the heart. I felt my heart race. The pressure, the pull, it was coming from the center of the ring, from the place where the stones met. Without thinking, I rose to my feet, drawn to the center, where the earth seemed to breathe, to move in a slow, rhythmic pattern. As I stepped into the center, the ground cracked open beneath me. The earth parted, and from the depths of the steppes, something rose. It wasn't a creature, not in the way I had imagined. It wasn't a thing of flesh and bone. No, this was something else entirely. It was a presence, a force of nature that had been buried beneath the dunes for as long as the steppes had existed. It was not a god, not a spirit, but the heart of the land, the pulse that had once shaped it, the force that had given birth to the endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth. It was the land itself. I stood frozen, unable to move as the presence rose from the depths of the earth, swirling in a mass of shadows, light, and dust. The air thickened with its weight, the very sky above me trembling under the force of its power. The wind returned, a violent gust that swept across the steppes, howling like a storm, but this time it was different. It wasn't just the wind. It was the voice of the land, the deep, rumbling voice that had echoed in my mind, that had pulled me here. You have come to claim the heart. It spoke to me, not in words, but in a surge of images, feelings, memories. I saw the land as it had once been, teeming with life, lush, green, full of vibrant energy. I saw the nomads, the traders, the travelers who had once roamed these lands freely, before the curse of time had drained the life from the earth. I saw the first bones of the land, the first death, the first memory. And then, I saw the cycle, the endless, unbroken cycle that had shaped everything, that had shaped me. The presence surged forward, its power crashing into me, and I felt it, a deep, cold understanding. I was not just a part of the land. I was not just a keeper of memories. I was the key, the one who would unlock the steppes' deepest secrets, the one who would carry the land's heartbeat forward. I had come to claim the heart, yes, but I had also come to become it. The spirits, the nomads, the bones, they were all part of the same story, part of the same cycle. And now, so was I. The presence before me began to fade, retreating back into the earth, sinking into the depths from which it had risen. But it left something behind, something deep within me, a knowledge. I wasn't just a chronicler anymore. I wasn't just a keeper of stories. I had become a part of the steppes, the heart of the steppes. The land's pulse would flow through me, its memories would live through me, and I would carry its stories forward, into the future, into eternity. The wind calmed, and the sand settled once more. The ring of stones remained, silent and still, waiting for the next traveler to arrive. But I had already found my place. The steppes had claimed me fully, and I would never leave. The wind had quieted, leaving behind a strange stillness that seemed to hang in the air like a breath held too long. I stood at the center of the stone ring, the weight of the land's presence heavy within me, pressing against my chest, my bones, my soul. The pulse of the steppes was now my own, a rhythmic thrum that filled the spaces between my thoughts, between my every breath. I could feel the land's memories stretching out, weaving through the very air, and they were no longer distant. They were inside me, wrapping around me like the ribbons of the spirits. I had become part of something much larger than I had ever understood, something that existed far beyond the edges of my vision. The land had never truly been empty. It had been full of stories, of echoes, of the voices of those who had come before me. And now I was one of those voices. The spirits were still with me, their pale blue light flickering at the edges of my consciousness, guiding me, watching me. They had always been there, waiting, but now I could feel their presence more intimately, as though they were part of me. Every story I carried, every memory I absorbed, added another layer to my existence. But now they weren't just whispers in my mind. They were alive, a part of the land, a part of me. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. The air was cool now, carrying the scent of something ancient and forgotten. The land was still, waiting. What now? The question echoed in my mind, but there was no answer. Not yet. The steppes had given me the key, had given me its pulse, its memories, but it had also given me something else. A task. Purpose. And though I had no clear vision of what that purpose was, I knew, deep in my bones, that it was mine to fulfill. I began to walk again. The stones beneath my feet were cold, ancient, their surfaces worn smooth by time and the weight of centuries. The ribbon of light that swirled around my wrists grew brighter as I moved, as though responding to some unseen command. I could feel the land shifting beneath me, the bones of the earth stirring in response to my every step. I wasn't sure how much time had passed since I had entered the ring. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the moon was just a thin crescent, casting its pale light across the desert. The world felt timeless here, the days and nights blending into one continuous stretch of existence. And yet, there was a sense of urgency now, an awareness that something was coming. The land was preparing, and I could feel it. I didn't know where I was going, but I didn't need to. I felt the land pulling me forward, guiding me to somewhere deep within the steppes, to somewhere that was hidden, waiting to be uncovered. I could sense it in the way the wind shifted, in the way the sand moved beneath my feet. It was as though the land was alive, breathing, and I was a part of it. The pull was not physical. It was something deeper, something spiritual, something that resonated within the very core of my being. As I walked, the spirits began to manifest more clearly. I could see them now, their skeletal forms glowing softly in the moonlight, their bodies drifting in the breeze like wisps of smoke. They didn't speak, but their presence was undeniable. They followed me, walking just behind, their silent footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. And with each step, the land seemed to grow more alive, more attuned to my every movement. I had come to realize that the steppes were not just a place. They were a force, a living entity that had been shaped by the lives and deaths of countless souls, a place where the dead had no true end. The land had a purpose, and I was now a part of that purpose. The question was no longer what I would do. The question was what the steppes would do with me. The wind picked up again, swirling around me in wild gusts, and I could hear the distant howls of creatures I couldn't see. But the sounds were not the cries of animals or beasts. They were something else. They were the sounds of the dead, the spirits of the land, the echoes of lives long extinguished, and they were calling to me. Their whispers grew louder, swirling around me, each voice distinct, each one carrying its own story. And then I saw it. In the distance, far beyond the dunes, something shimmered in the moonlight. At first, I thought it was a mirage, the heat of the desert playing tricks on my eyes. But as I drew closer, the shape became clearer. It was a structure, tall and imposing, rising from the sand like the remnants of some long-forgotten civilization. It was made of stone, its surface covered in intricate carvings, symbols I recognized from the stones around the ring. But this was something different. This was a place of power. It was a temple, I realized. The temple had been buried, forgotten, its existence hidden beneath the sands for centuries. And yet now it had been uncovered by me, by the land, by the pull that had drawn me to this very spot. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest, the air growing thicker, more charged with energy. The spirits had gathered around me now, their forms shimmering in the light, their bones moving in time with the rhythm of the land. The temple seemed to call to them as well, as though it had been waiting for their return. I could feel the pressure building inside me, the knowledge of what had to be done settling into my bones like an ancient weight. The temple was a place of power, yes, but it was also a place of memory, a place where the land's pulse had been stored, where the stories of the dead had been written into the very stone. And it was here that I would carry those stories forward. I reached the entrance of the temple, the stone doors cracked and broken, as though they had been waiting for me to open them. The air around me crackled with energy, the ribbons of light twisting and curling around me like tendrils of a great storm. With a deep breath, I stepped inside. The interior of the temple was dark, the air thick with dust, but as my foot crossed the threshold, the stone began to hum. The walls were covered in the same symbols, the same intricate patterns, but they were different here, more complex, more alive. I could feel them, the stories, etched into the stone, waiting to be read, waiting to be remembered. I raised my hand, and the ribbons of light swirled around me, guiding me forward. The voices of the spirits grew louder now, their whispers merging into a single unified sound. It was not a sound I could hear with my ears. No, it was something deeper. It was a pulse, a rhythm, a heartbeat that echoed through the very walls of the temple. The stone beneath my feet began to shift, the ground rumbling as if the temple itself was awakening, responding to my presence. And then, in the center of the temple, a light flared, bright and blinding, and I knew this was the heart, the place where the land's memory had been stored, where it had been preserved through the centuries, waiting for someone to come and claim it. I reached out, my hand trembling as I touched the center of the temple. The light flared brighter, and the air around me seemed to collapse, folding inward until I was surrounded by darkness. And then I felt it. The land's pulse, now part of me, surged through my body. The stories, the memories, the whispers of the dead, they all flooded into me at once, crashing over me like a wave. I saw their lives, their deaths, their struggles and triumphs, their love and pain. I felt their hunger, their desire to be remembered, their need to return. And then I understood. I was not just a keeper of stories. I was the bridge. I was the one who would carry their stories forward into the world of the living. The Steppes would never forget. And now neither would I. The world around me dissolved into a blur of light and memory. I felt as if I were suspended between two realms, between life and death, between the past and the future. The stories of the spirits, the memories of the dead, flooded my mind in a rush. They were not just images. They were sensations. Warmth, cold, pain, joy, fear, love. All of it blending together in an unbreakable web of existence. I saw the nomads again. Their journeys, their endless migration across the desert, chasing the horizon. I felt the weight of their struggles as they fought against the wind, against the heat, against the hunger that gnawed at their bellies. I could taste the salt in their sweat, feel the sand beneath their feet, feel the grit that had settled into their bones. They were alive, and yet they were not. Their lives had ended. Their bodies had crumbled to dust long ago. But their memories remained, alive in the pulse of the land. And then I saw others, those who had never walked these dunes, but whose lives had touched the steppes in some way. Travelers who had passed through, traders who had left their mark, soldiers who had fought battles that no one would remember. They, too, were part of the land's memory. And now they were all a part of me. As I stood in the center of the temple, surrounded by the overwhelming weight of these memories, I realized something deeper. The steppes were not just a place where the dead were forgotten. They were a place where the dead lived. The spirits didn't wander aimlessly through the desert. They were drawn here to be remembered. They wanted to be remembered. And the land? The land had been shaped by their memories, by their stories. It was alive with their presence, and it had been waiting for someone me to carry those stories forward, to preserve them for eternity. The light around me dimmed, and I found myself back in the center of the temple. The air was heavy with the weight of what I had just experienced, the pressure of the land's pulse still thrumming through me. But now I understood what had to be done. The temple was not just a place of power. It was a repository, a place where all the stories of the dead had been gathered, waiting for someone to claim them, to carry them forward. And that was my task. That was my role. I was not just a keeper of stories. I was a deliverer. I was the one who would give the dead their voice, who would bring their memories into the world of the living. I turned, my mind still reeling from the flood of memories, and I saw it. A passage hidden in the stone, leading deeper into the heart of the temple. It had not been there before, at least not in the way I had seen it. It was as if the temple itself had revealed this path to me, now that I had unlocked its secrets. I moved toward it, my body moving almost automatically, drawn by the same instinct that had guided me through the steps. The air around me seemed to grow heavier, the darkness thicker, as if I were descending deeper into the earth, into the very heart of the land. The passage was narrow, the walls covered in the same intricate carvings I had seen earlier, but now they seemed to shift and move, as though they were alive, responding to my presence. I could feel the energy of the land flowing through them, guiding me, urging me onward. The further I descended, the more intense the pulse of the land became. It was a rhythmic beating, like the heart of the world, thumping in time with my own. I could feel it in my chest, in my bones. It was as though I were becoming one with the land itself, as if the memories of the dead were merging with my own, becoming a part of me. I reached the end of the passage, and before me stood a massive door, made of dark stone, covered in more symbols, more patterns that seemed to shift and change as I approached. It was different from anything I had seen before, larger, more imposing. And yet I felt no fear. The land had chosen me, and this was my path. There was no turning back. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the surface of the door. The moment I touched it, the stone groaned, as if it were waking from a long slumber. Slowly, the door began to open, revealing what lay beyond. What I saw took my breath away. It was a vast chamber, larger than any I had imagined, its walls lined with shelves upon shelves of bones. They were not scattered, not broken. They were carefully arranged, each bone placed with purpose, each one a part of the great story of the steppes. And above them, stretching from one end of the chamber to the other, were the ribbons of light, the same ethereal glow that I had seen in the spirits, now woven into a massive tapestry that hung in the air. It was a tapestry of the dead, a living story that stretched through time and space, connecting the past with the present, the living with the dead. The land had kept its memory here, in this place, waiting for someone to come and understand it. And now that someone was me. The light from the tapestry pulsed, and I could feel the pull again, stronger this time. It wasn't just the pull of the land, or the pull of the spirits. It was the pull of the stories, the memories, the lives that had been lost. They were all here, in this place, waiting to be remembered. I stepped forward, my mind racing. The bones around me seemed to hum, their presence vibrating in the air, as though they were alive with the energy of the steppes. I felt their gaze, their eyes upon me, and I knew what I had to do. I raised my hands, and the ribbons of light swirled around me, responding to my every movement, wrapping around my body, pulling me into the tapestry. The memories of the dead flooded into me again, this time more intense, more vivid. I saw faces, heard voices, felt lives that had come before. Their stories were all here, written in the bones, in the light, in the very fabric of the land. I began to speak. The words were not my own, not truly. They were the words of the dead, the stories they had left behind, the memories they had carried with them. And I spoke them aloud, letting the words flow from my lips, carrying the stories into the world, bringing the dead to life once more. The light flared brighter, the ribbons of energy swirling around me like a storm. I felt the power of the land, the pulse of the steppes, surging through me. The memories of the dead poured out of me, spreading across the land, filling the air, the earth, the sky. They were no longer just stories. They were alive. The land had claimed me, yes, but I had claimed it in return. I had become its voice, its memory. And as I stood in the heart of the temple, surrounded by the bones of the past and the spirits of the dead, I knew that the cycle would continue, that the stories would never end. They would live on, carried forward by me, by the steppes, by the land itself. The wind outside the temple shifted, carrying with it a strange, resonant hum, like the faint echo of a distant song. It filled the air around me, vibrating through the stone walls, as if the land itself was alive with the energy of the stories now woven into its very fabric. The bones in the chamber seemed to move subtly, as if they were shifting in place, realigning with the flow of time and memory. I stood amidst the great web of light, feeling the land pulse beneath my feet, my very soul vibrating in time with it. The steppes had granted me its most sacred gift, the knowledge, the stories, and the eternal pulse of the land. But with that gift came the weight of responsibility. The task ahead of me was not a fleeting one. It was not a job I could abandon, not a story I could walk away from. I was bound to the land, to the spirits, to the endless cycle that would stretch far beyond my lifetime. But there was something more, a feeling deep inside me, something I couldn't fully grasp yet. It was like the pull of something still waiting, just beyond the horizon, calling to me. I turned away from the chamber, leaving the ancient bones and the swirling ribbons of light behind, stepping into the hallways of the temple, the flickering light casting long shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the weight of the land's memories, but now it felt different. The pulse had slowed, become quieter, more contemplative, as though the land was waiting for the next phase, the next movement in its ancient, unbroken story. I had thought the land would speak to me, give me some final instruction, some great revelation, but there was only silence. The spirits had faded back into the quiet, their whispers fading into the ether. The temple felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something I wasn't sure I understood. The corridors of the temple stretched before me, the carved stone walls now alive with symbols I hadn't noticed before. Symbols that shifted, forming and reforming into new patterns, new constellations. The very structure seemed to be alive, breathing in time with the land itself, resonating with the pulse of the steppes. It was as though the temple had always been here, buried in the sands, waiting for the right moment, waiting for me. I walked through the halls, my footsteps echoing, my mind racing with the weight of what I had learned, of what I had become. The voices of the dead still swirled around me, not in a chaotic, overwhelming rush as before, but in a gentle hum, like an undercurrent flowing just below the surface of my thoughts. Each voice, each story, was like a thread woven into the larger tapestry of the land's memory. I could feel their presence, their stories, their lives stretching out before me, waiting to be carried forward. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay here forever. The land had given me its gift, its heart, its pulse. But it was now my task to carry it into the world of the living. The steppes weren't just a place of death. They were a place of rebirth, of memory, of life itself. And I had to be its messenger, its chronicler. The dead needed to be remembered. Their stories needed to be told. And I would be the one to speak them. But there was still something, someone, I had to find. I had felt it before, that pull in the air, the sense that something or someone was waiting for me, just beyond my reach. It wasn't a person, not in the way I understood people. No, it was something older, something buried deep within the land itself, something that had been waiting for me to come, to claim my place in the cycle. Something that had always been here, a part of the land's heartbeat, but hidden, dormant, until now. The passage before me widened, leading into another chamber, this one larger than any I had seen. The walls were covered in faded murals, their colors muted by time but still vivid in their energy. They told stories of the ancient nomads, their battles, their victories, their losses. There were images of them standing tall in the face of the storm, their figures wrapped in the swirling ribbons of light, the very same that had marked the spirits I had encountered. The murals shifted as I walked closer, their stories coming to life as if the walls themselves were breathing with the memories of the past. At the center of the chamber was a raised platform, and on it stood a figure. Not a spirit, not a nomad, but something else. It was not flesh and bone, but it was alive. It shimmered in the dim light, its form like a figure woven from the very fabric of the steppes, made of bone, sand, and light. Its shape was ever-changing, shifting with every passing moment, never fully solid, never fully still. And then it spoke, not with words, but with a sound and understanding, a voice that resonated deep within my chest, within my very being. You have come. You have found the heart of the land. I felt the words more than I heard them. The voice was not just a sound. It was an experience, an awareness that flooded my mind. I felt the presence of the being before me. It was the land. The pulse, the energy, the very essence of the steppes. It had no true form, no true body, but it was alive. And it was speaking to me, calling me into its presence. You are the bridge. The stories you carry will carry the land's pulse into the world of the living. But there is one more thing you must understand. The air around me grew heavier, the presence of the being pressing in on me, filling the chamber with its energy. The walls of the temple, the very ground beneath me, seemed to shift, as though everything was being pulled toward this central point, this moment in time. The cycle will continue, yes, but you will need to choose. You must choose whether to remain here, within the pulse of the land, carrying its memories to those who will hear, or whether you will return to the world of the living, to bring the stories of the dead into the world of the mortal. The voice was no longer a question. It was a challenge, a decision I would have to make. There was no right answer, no easy path forward. The steppes were alive, and I was now part of them, a part of its heartbeat, its endless cycle. But could I return to the world of the living, to bring the dead stories into the present, to give them a voice in a world that was so eager to forget? Or would I remain here, forever tied to the land, carrying its pulse, its memory, in the quiet corners of the world? The choice was mine, but even as the weight of it pressed down on me, I knew there was no easy way out. The steppes had claimed me, and I had claimed them in return. I had become the land's memory, and the land had become my soul. But the world beyond was calling. The presence in front of me shimmered, the light bending around its form as if it were made of starlight, but with a darkness at its core, an ancient shadow that whispered of forgotten ages. It was not a being of flesh, but a manifestation of the land itself, its pulse echoing in my mind, in my bones. The words, if they could even be called that, rang through me again. You must choose. The air grew heavier still, thick with the weight of the decision pressing down upon me. The chamber, with its shifting murals and the hum of the land's heartbeat, seemed to contract, closing in as though the walls themselves were aware of the momentous choice I faced. The figure before me was not something I could touch, not something I could truly see with mortal eyes, but I could feel it, its presence filling the space, suffusing every corner of the temple with its energy. It was a feeling both beautiful and terrifying, like standing at the edge of a vast abyss and knowing that to step forward would change everything. The dead must be remembered. The voice, if it could be called that, rippled through the very air. But those who live must also know. There are stories that will fade if they are not carried beyond the pulse of the steppes. Will you carry them to those who are still alive? Or will you remain here, with us, in the silence of memory? I stood frozen. There was no fear, not really, at least not in the way one would fear an enemy or a threat. This was not about danger. This was about purpose. This was about the weight of responsibility, the enormity of the task that had been placed upon me. The steppes had made me its bridge, its memory, its pulse. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to be the messenger to the living world, to carry the weight of the dead stories into a world that might not want to hear them. I had felt the land's energy surge through me, seen the lives of those who had walked these sands long before me, but I had never truly understood what that meant until now. The being's form shimmered, twisting, undulating like the desert winds, until it was almost unrecognizable. Then, in a sudden flash of clarity, its voice again filled my mind, deeper this time, more insistent. What you carry will never leave you. It is part of you now as you are part of the land. But you must decide whether you will leave the steppes in search of those who need to hear the stories, or remain an eternal watcher, a keeper of memories that no one may ever know. I could feel the pulse in my chest, the echo of the land's heartbeat moving through me, as if the land itself were waiting, holding its breath, waiting for me to make my decision. And yet, even as the pressure built, I couldn't bring myself to answer immediately. I thought of the world beyond the steppes, of the people still alive, living in cities I could scarcely recall, their names and faces fading from my mind. Would they even listen? Would they understand the weight of these stories? Or would they dismiss them as ancient myths, legends of a forgotten time? But then another thought, another feeling slipped into my mind. The spirits, the dead, they had trusted me with their stories, with their lives. They had chosen me to remember, to keep their voices alive. I had become their vessel, their bridge to the past. And even if the living world did not care, the spirits deserved to be heard. They deserved to be remembered. If I stayed here, I would be at peace with the land, but the stories would never be shared. They would remain trapped within the temple, a secret known only to those who wandered the dunes, who could hear the whispers on the wind. But the world beyond, the world of the living, needed to hear those stories. It needed to know that the past was not truly gone, that the dead were never truly silent. The stories of the steppes, of the spirits, had to be shared. The living world needed to remember. I inhaled sharply, the air thick with the weight of the decision. The land seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the moment when the scales would tip, when I would decide. The being shimmered once more, its form growing clearer, its edges sharp and defined. And then, it spoke, its voice soft and intimate this time, like a whisper in the dark. You have chosen. I nodded, though the figure could not see me. The choice had already been made. I was a keeper of stories, a vessel of the dead. But I was also something more. The steppes had given me a purpose, its purpose. The pulse of the land would not be forgotten. The dead would not fade into silence. I would carry their voices into the world, into the hearts of those who still had the capacity to listen. But I wasn't just carrying the stories for the sake of memory. No, I was carrying them because they mattered. The land had been shaped by the lives of the people who had walked it, by their dreams, their desires, their fears. The stories weren't just history. They were alive. They were a part of the living world. And if they were forgotten, the land would lose its voice. The land would die. It is time, the voice said softly. Go now. Carry the stories with you. But know that you will always be part of the steppes. You will always be its memory, its heartbeat. The temple around me began to shift, the walls fading away like sand being swept by the wind. The great tapestries of light unraveled, leaving behind only the faintest trace of their glow. The bones that had lined the chamber, the spirits that had gathered, everything faded, not into darkness, but into a soft, glowing mist. The pulse of the land, the heart of the steppes, remained with me, now a part of my very being. I stepped forward, the ground beneath me shifting, the air heavy with the weight of a new beginning. The temple was gone, the steppes were gone, but I was still there, standing in the emptiness of it all, the land's pulse still thumping in my chest. And then I found myself outside. The stars hung high above, cold and distant, but I felt their presence, their watchful gaze. The wind was still, the dunes of sand stretching out before me in endless, silent waves. But it was different now. The land was no longer just a place. It was a story, a living, breathing memory, and I would carry it forward. I would carry it to the world. As I walked, the wind began to stir, and I felt the spirits again walking beside me. Their whispers were quiet now, but no less powerful. They were not just ghosts. They were a part of me, They were the land's heartbeat, and now they would live through me. The pulse of the steppes would never stop. Not while I still walked. The wind, once a whisper, now began to hum as I walked, growing louder, as if the very air around me was alive with the pulse of the steppes. The sand shifted beneath my feet with each step, an echo of the land's restless heartbeat. And I could feel it, deep inside me, the stories, the memories, the lives of those who had walked these dunes before me. Their voices were soft, but ever present, like the distant murmur of a river flowing beneath the surface of the earth. As I walked, the world around me seemed to come alive, not in a vivid burst of color, but in subtle, fleeting moments. The way the stars above flickered in time with the rhythm in my chest, the way the shadows stretched and twisted, as if they too were listening to the pulse of the land. The land, the steppes, was not just a place. It was a presence, a consciousness, something ancient and vast, stretching beyond the horizon and into the deepest parts of time. I could hear the spirits now, clearer than ever, their voices not as whispers, but as songs. A lullaby of the dead, their memories intertwined with the very sand beneath my feet. Their lives had been woven into the fabric of the land, their stories not lost, but scattered like seeds to be carried on the wind, to be reborn in the hearts of those who would listen. The path ahead of me was unclear, and yet I moved forward. It didn't matter if the road led to the cities of men or to some far-off, forgotten place. The land had given me my purpose. I was the bridge, the keeper of stories, the messenger of the dead. The question was no longer whether I should walk this path, but what I would do when I reached the end of it. Would I become a voice for those who had no one to speak for them, or would I be silenced, just another soul lost to the world's unfeeling march? Forward? I didn't know, but I knew this much. The pulse of the steppes would never fade. Not as long as I carried it with me. The wind howled again, this time like a cry, rising from the dunes like the voices of the dead in unison. Their songs intertwined with the rhythm of the land. And then, in the distance, I saw it, the faint outline of a figure, walking toward me, barely visible in the shimmering haze of the desert night. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. Was it a mirage? A trick of the mind? Or was it something more? The figure drew closer, and as it did, I felt the pulse in my chest quicken, like the thrum of a distant drum. It was no mirage. It was real. It was a person, but not like any person I had ever seen. Their body was translucent, their form shifting like a shadow in the light, as if they were made of the very air around them. Their eyes, though, were the strangest thing, black as night, but filled with an endless depth, an ancient sorrow that I could feel all the way to the marrow of my bones. "Do you hear them?" the figure asked, their voice soft, but filled with weight. I nodded slowly, unsure if I was truly hearing the voice or feeling it, as if it were carried on the wind itself. "I hear them, the dead, their stories." The figure smiled, though it was more of a faint pulling of the lips than an expression of joy. "You are their keeper now," they said, their voice barely audible over the wind. "The land has chosen you, but the stories are not enough. The world beyond the steppes must know. They must listen." I took a deep breath, the words sinking into my mind like stones dropped into a still pond, the ripples spreading outward. "I will carry their voices, but the world, they will not listen." The figure's eyes darkened, and the air around us seemed to grow colder. "The world is blind to the dead," they said, "but you will make them see. You will make them listen." Their voice grew stronger, more insistent. "Do not forget why you walk this path. Do not forget why you were chosen." I felt the weight of their gaze upon me, their presence like a pressure on my chest. The wind howled again, louder this time, as if the very desert itself were in mourning. I knew what I had to do, but there was a fear in me that I couldn't shake. A fear that I was not enough, that I would not be able to carry the stories, to bring the voices of the dead to those who would never hear them. The figure began to fade, their form dissipating into the wind like smoke, their eyes lingering on me for a moment longer before they were gone. I stood alone in the desert once more, the wind whispering in my ears, the land's pulse thumping through my chest. The steppes had given me its heartbeat, its memory, and now it was up to me to share it with the world. But the weight of the task seemed heavier than ever before. How could I possibly convince those who had no idea of the land's pulse, no idea of the stories buried beneath the sand, to listen? But the dead had trusted me. The steppes had trusted me, and I would not fail them. I turned, my eyes scanning the horizon, searching for something, for anything that would show me the way. But all I could see was the endless desert, stretching out in every direction, its vastness overwhelming and infinite. It was both beautiful and desolate, like the memories of the dead, faint and forgotten, yet indelible in their presence. And then I saw it, a flicker of movement on the horizon, a shape rising out of the sands. A city, perhaps, or a caravan making its way through the dunes. I could not tell, but it was a sign, a destination, the world beyond the steppes. I began to walk toward it, the spirits of the land walking beside me, their whispers like the wind in my ears, urging me forward. The pulse of the steppes was in my heart, in my mind, in every step I took. The world beyond was waiting, and I would bring the stories with me. I would make them listen. As I walked, the wind began to pick up again, swirling around me, carrying the voices of the dead with it. The land was alive, its heartbeat echoing through the air, through the sand. The steppes had given me its memories, and I would share them with the world, no matter how far I had to go. The dead would not fade. They would not be forgotten, and I would make sure of it. The horizon stretched before me, a vast expanse of sand and wind, like the edge of the world itself. But in the distance, I could make out something, faint, almost imperceptible against the shifting dunes, but real nonetheless. It was a form, an outline, a shadow against the unbroken sea of sand. A caravan, perhaps, or a small settlement, moving slowly through the desert. I didn't know what it was, but it was a sign, a place to begin. I had to start somewhere. With the wind at my back, I began my journey toward it. The sand whispered beneath my feet, the pulse of the steppes ever present, as if the land itself were urging me forward. The spirits seemed to guide me, their voices softer now, almost like a distant hum, woven into the fabric of the world. They were no longer just shadows in the dark, their stories lost to time. They were with me, inside me, carried forward by my every step. I could feel them, their lives still burning bright within me, even though their bodies had long since returned to dust. As I walked, the shape on the horizon grew clearer. It wasn't a caravan after all, but a city, if you could call it that. A small, crumbling outpost, built in the shadow of a great mountain of sand. The walls were ancient, barely standing against the winds that had gnawed at them for centuries. The rooftops were jagged, crumbling stone, the windows empty and hollow, like the eyes of a long-dead corpse. Yet there was life here. People moved in the streets, thin figures cloaked in dust and rags, their faces hard and sun-scarred, their eyes hollow from the harshness of the desert. I slowed as I approached, unsure of what to expect. The city was silent, save for the sounds of the wind and the occasional whisper of voices. There was no laughter, no chatter, no music. The air was thick with a heavy, oppressive quiet, as if the very ground beneath my feet had been stilled, waiting for something to break the silence. I felt an uneasy weight in my chest, the spirits growing restless in my mind, their presence like a flickering flame. They were here, too. I could feel them, the souls of those who had walked the steppes before, but now bound to this forgotten city, their stories lost in the desolation of time. I took a deep breath, then stepped through the crumbling archway into the city. The air inside was stifling, the streets narrow and choked with dust. The buildings loomed over me, leaning at strange angles, their walls pocked and worn by the desert winds. A few figures shuffled past, their heads down, their faces hidden beneath tattered cloths. I caught the glint of their eyes as they passed, and they looked through me, not at me, as if I were nothing more than a passing shadow in a place long forgotten. There was no recognition, no curiosity, just a quiet, distant emptiness. I kept walking, my feet dragging through the thick dust, the pulse of the steppes growing stronger within me. the hum of the land vibrating through my chest. I had come to this place for a reason, though I wasn't sure what that reason was. The city felt wrong, empty, as if the life that once thrived here had been drained away, leaving only the remnants behind. I reached the heart of the city, a central square of sorts, though it was little more than a cracked stone circle surrounded by collapsing structures. In the center stood a monument, an obelisk weathered and cracked, but still standing tall. Its surface was covered in strange carvings, symbols that I couldn't quite understand, but that filled me with a deep sense of unease. As if the stone itself was watching me, waiting. I walked toward it, the air growing colder, heavier with each step. The spirits that had been with me seemed to stir, their voices rising again, faint but insistent. They were here too, buried beneath the dust, forgotten by the living but not by the land. They were reaching out to me, trying to tell me something. I placed a hand on the obelisk. The stone was cool, its surface worn smooth by centuries of wind and time. But as my fingers brushed against it, I felt a sharp jolt, a pulse, like the land itself had reacted to my touch. The pulse of the steppes surged through me, stronger than ever before, and I staggered back, my heart pounding in my chest. The wind picked up, swirling around me, and the city seemed to come alive, the faintest whispers of voices filling the air. The spirits were restless, their stories aching to be told. The carvings on the obelisk shifted before my eyes, twisting into new shapes, forming new patterns that seemed to beckon me forward. I could feel the weight of the land, the ancient pulse, thumping through the monument, as if it were alive, a conduit for the stories buried deep within the earth. The spirits were calling, urging me to understand, to listen. I stepped closer, my hand reaching for the carvings. As soon as my fingers touched the stone again, the pulse surged, flooding my mind with images. Flashes of lives lived long ago, faces I could never have seen, names I had never known. The memories of the dead poured into me like a flood, overwhelming, suffocating, and yet strangely familiar. I saw the nomads again, their skeletal forms trailing ribbons of light as they walked across the desert, their eyes filled with a sadness I could not comprehend. I saw the city, alive with people, bustling with life, before the sands had claimed it. I saw them all, the lost, the forgotten, the dead, and I felt their voices, their stories, twisting around me, tightening their grip on my heart. I gasped, pulling my hand away, the images fading, leaving only the echo of their presence. The city had once been alive, full of stories, full of people. But now, it was a graveyard, a place where memories had been buried beneath the weight of time and sand. And yet, the land remembered, the steppes remembered, the spirits remembered. I stood there, staring at the obelisk, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it all. The spirits wanted their stories to be told. They wanted to be remembered. But what could I do? How could I make them hear? The city was a graveyard, its people long gone. The living were so far removed from the past that they couldn't even comprehend the stories buried beneath their feet. But I knew one thing. The stories couldn't stay buried forever. The steppes had chosen me. I was their keeper, their bridge, their voice, and I would not let their stories fade into silence. I turned and began walking again, the whispers of the dead in my ears, urging me forward. The city was only the beginning. I had a long way to go, and the world beyond the steppes was waiting. The stories would be told, and I would be the one to carry them. The wind had died down by the time I left the city behind. The pulse of the steppes still throbbed in my chest, but the weight of the memories, the flood of images and voices that had surged through me at the obelisk, remained heavy on my mind. I could feel the spirits all around me, their presence woven into the very fabric of the land. But now, something had changed. They were not just voices from the past anymore. They were real. They were alive in the pulse of the land, in the whisper of the sand. And they wanted to be remembered. I had thought the city would give me answers, but it had only raised more questions. Why had the dead been forgotten here? Why had their stories been buried beneath the weight of time and sand? And what could I do to change it? I wasn't sure yet, but I knew one thing. The spirits were not going to let me leave this place until I had done what I had come here to do. The city had faded into the distance, a crumbling shadow in the vast desert. I kept walking, the sand beneath my feet soft and endless. The horizon seemed to stretch on forever, the world before me a blank canvas waiting for something to paint it. But as I moved, the weight of the land grew heavier. I could feel the pulse in my chest, stronger now, as if the land were calling me deeper into its heart. I didn't know where I was going, but the spirits did. They were guiding me, pulling me forward, telling me there was something more, something I had yet to understand. The wind began to stir again, carrying with it the faintest sound. A voice, soft and distant, barely audible over the howling desert. I paused, straining to hear it. The voice was not in my ears. It was in my mind, a whisper that slipped between thoughts, like a secret passed from one soul to another. The heart of the land waits for you. I froze. The voice was clear now, no longer a whisper, but a command, a pull that I couldn't ignore. The heart of the land? What did that mean? I looked around, trying to make sense of the words, but all I could see was the endless stretch of sand and the burning sky above. The spirits had spoken of it before, but now it felt like they were urging me toward it. They were pulling me, calling me to something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. Without thinking, I turned and began to walk in the direction I felt the pull. The landscape around me seemed to shift, the wind growing stronger, the air growing heavier, as though the land itself were alive with anticipation. The sand beneath my feet no longer felt soft and empty. It felt solid, purposeful, as if each grain had a role to play in the great story of the steppes. The journey was long, and the sun sank lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert. But with each step, I felt closer to something, closer to the heart of the land. The spirits surrounded me now, their voices quiet but insistent, weaving around me like threads in the wind. They were guiding me, telling me I was on the right path. But the path was not without its dangers. As the sun set and the desert plunged into darkness, the air grew colder. The wind howled again, this time carrying a different sound. A low, rumbling growl, like something large and dangerous moving in the distance. I stopped, my heart pounding in my chest. The land was no longer the quiet, patient place it had once seemed. It was alive now, restless, aware of my presence. The pulse beneath my feet quickened, the rhythm of the land growing faster, more intense. And with it came the rumbling growl, a sound I could no longer ignore. I turned in the direction of the noise, straining my eyes in the dim light. At first, I saw nothing but the swirling sand. But then, there was movement, a shape, dark and massive, emerging from the shadows. It was too large to be a human, too fluid to be an animal. It was something else, something born of the land itself, a creature of sand and shadow, its form, shifting with the wind, its eyes glowing with a fierce, otherworldly light. The wind kicked up again, and the creature lunged, a blur of sand and teeth. My heart raced, and I stumbled backward, barely managing to stay on my feet. I could feel the spirits around me, their whispers louder now, like a chorus urging me to run, to flee from this thing, but my feet were frozen. The creature was upon me before I could react, its massive jaws snapping inches from my face. And then, as if the land itself were intervening, the creature stopped. Its glowing eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, time seemed to stretch out in the air. The growl stopped, the wind slowed, and the creature, this manifestation of the steppes, simply stood there watching me. I could feel its power, its ancient hunger, but I could also feel something else, something deeper, something almost recognizable. The creature's form began to shift, the sand and shadow separating like mist. I saw its true shape now, an enormous, skeletal figure, wrapped in tattered cloth and bone, its body a grotesque mimicry of the nomads who had once walked these lands. Its eyes were hollow, yet they held a deep, ancient sadness, a longing that I could feel all the way through my chest. This was not a beast. This was a spirit, a soul lost in the wind, forgotten by time, a remnant of those who had wandered the steppes long ago. And then, in a voice that was not a voice at all, but a feeling, a presence, I heard it. You have come. You have felt the pulse. I nodded, my heart still pounding, my breath shallow. I didn't know what to say, but I knew what the creature meant. I had felt the pulse of the steppes, the heartbeat of the land, the thrum of the stories buried deep beneath the sand. And the creature before me, this forgotten soul, was a part of that pulse, a part of the land's memory. The heart of the land awaits, the creature whispered, its form beginning to dissolve back into the wind. You will find it. You must. But be warned. The heart is not a place, but a choice. With that, it was gone, swallowed up by the sand, leaving nothing behind but the faint echo of its presence. The wind howled again, but this time the growl was gone. I stood alone once more, the pulse of the steppes thumping in my chest, louder now, as if the land itself were urging me forward. The heart of the land. A choice. I didn't know what that meant, not yet, but I knew that I had to keep moving, keep searching. The spirits were with me, the pulse was with me, and whatever lay ahead, whatever awaited me in the heart of the land, I would face it. The wind had quieted after the creature's disappearance, leaving the desert in a heavy, unnatural silence. The stars overhead blinked like distant eyes, cold and unfeeling. I stood still, feeling the pull of the land's pulse in my chest, the vibrations growing stronger with every heartbeat. I wasn't sure what the creature had meant by the heart of the land or a choice, but the words felt like they were etched into my soul, like they were a riddle I had to solve. With a deep breath, I began walking again, the sand shifting beneath my feet, the night stretching out endlessly before me. The desert had always felt like a place of solitude, of silence, but now it felt different. It wasn't empty. It wasn't just a vast, lifeless expanse. It was alive, filled with the memories of the dead, with the pulse of those who had walked before me. I could feel their eyes on me, the weight of their stories, their lives woven into the very fabric of the land. They weren't just shadows in the wind. They were waiting, watching. I had made my choice already, though I hadn't said it aloud. The steppes had chosen me to carry their memories, to be their voice in a world that had forgotten them. But the path ahead was unclear. What did it mean to carry the heart of the land? Was it a physical place, a location I could find? Or was it something deeper, something within myself? The desert stretched on, endless and unforgiving, and I realized that the land was not just a place I walked through. It was something I was becoming a part of. I was no longer just an outsider, an observer. I was part of the story, woven into the pulse of the steppes like the spirits that had walked here before. And I could feel it now, the heavy weight of that knowledge. It wasn't just the dead stories that I carried. It was their souls, their essence, their very being. The heart of the land was a place where the past and the present converged, where memory and life intertwined, where death was not an end but a continuation. I had not yet reached the heart, but I was already inside it. The air grew colder as the night deepened. The wind began to stir again, but this time it wasn't just the usual desert gusts. It was something else. A whisper in the air, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the same feeling I had experienced at the city, at the obelisk, but now it was stronger. The spirits were calling again, their voices clearer, more insistent. You are close. I stopped. The pulse was louder now, almost deafening, resonating in my bones. The ground beneath me vibrated, a steady rhythm that matched the beat of my heart. The voices surrounded me, swirling, converging, growing stronger. The heart of the land is within you. It has always been. But to truly carry it, you must let it fill you. Let it consume you. I hesitated. I had been walking for so long, listening to the voices, feeling the pull of the land. But now the weight of the decision pressed heavily on me. What would it mean to let the heart of the land consume me? Could I truly become a part of it without losing myself? The pulse in my chest throbbed again, and the sand shifted beneath me, swirling like a great storm. I closed my eyes for a moment, And when I opened them, I was no longer alone. The desert had transformed. Before me, standing just beyond the dunes, were figures. Ghostly, ethereal, their forms barely visible against the dark sky. They were not just spirits. They were the spirits of the land itself, of the nomads, of the forgotten souls who had lived and died here. Their skeletal bodies were wrapped in ethereal ribbons, the same shimmering strands I had seen before. But now, they were alive, moving, swirling around me like a storm of dust and light. They were not here to haunt me. They were here to guide me. I stood still, watching as they approached, their movements graceful but unsettling. Their hollow eyes glowed with an ancient fire, their bodies shifting like mirages in the wind. They were not dead, not in the way I had first understood death. They were memories made flesh, remnants of a time long past, still walking, still living in the pulse of the land. And now, they were surrounding me, enveloping me, their voices a chorus of whispers. You are the bridge. You are the pulse. The words flooded my mind, deeper than before, as if the spirits were speaking through me. They weren't just telling me what I had already known. They were showing me the pulse of the steppes, the heart of the land. It wasn't something that could be contained. It wasn't a place. It was a force, a living thing that flowed through everything, through time and space, through the very air itself. The spirits were not just memories. They were part of the land, and I was now part of them. I could feel it now. The connection, the truth. The heart of the land wasn't something I would find out there, buried beneath the sands. It was inside me. It was within everyone who had walked these steps, and it would continue to live in those who came after. The stories, the memories, they were not just relics of the past. They were alive. They were the pulse of the world, beating through every living thing. The spirits surrounded me, their voices echoing, their whispers blending together until they became one. You will carry the pulse to the living. You will make them see. You will make them remember. I nodded slowly, understanding. The choice wasn't about finding a place. It wasn't about locating the heart of the land. The heart of the land was the land. And the pulse, it was the stories, the memories, the lives of those who had walked before me. To carry the heart was not to hold it in my hands or find it in some forgotten temple. To carry the heart was to become it. I was the bridge, and I would carry the pulse of the steppes into the world. The spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving into the wind, their voices quieting until there was only the pulse. Steady, eternal, unbroken. I stood there, my heart racing, feeling the weight of what I had become. The spirits were gone, but their presence remained with me, woven into the pulse that throbbed in my chest. It would never leave me. Not now. Not ever. I turned and began to walk again, the desert stretching before me, the horizon dark and endless. The heart of the land was inside me now. The stories of the dead would live through me, and the pulse would carry me forward. I had a long way to go, but the journey had already begun. The desert stretched out endlessly before me, a vast sea of sand and silence, but now it felt different. The weight of the pulse was no longer just a presence. It was a part of me, woven into my bones, my blood, my breath. I walked with a new understanding, the spirits' whispers still lingering in my mind, urging me forward. They had said I was the bridge. The pulse of the steppes flowed through me, and I would carry it to the world. The wind began to stir again, but it wasn't the gentle breeze of the desert. It was sharp, biting, carrying with it a strange sense of urgency, like a storm on the horizon. The sand swirled around me, and I could feel it, the presence of something, someone, watching. The spirits were with me, but now, there was something else in the air, something older, something that had not been there before. I paused, my senses heightened, every nerve in my body tingling with the pressure of the moment. The pulse in my chest quickened, beating faster as the wind began to howl, the sand whipping around me in angry, swirling gusts. And then, from the shadows of the dunes, I saw a figure, a shape barely visible in the thickening dust. It was tall, shrouded in a cloak of tattered fabric, its form ethereal, like a wraith born of the wind and the sand. It moved toward me, its presence both comforting and unnerving. The wind seemed to bend around it, the sand swirling in its wake, but there was no sound, no footfalls on the earth, no rustle of cloth. It was as if the figure were both part of the land and beyond it, a thing of shadow and light. I felt the pulse in my chest stutter, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The figure stopped in front of me, its face hidden beneath a hood of dust and shadow. But even without seeing its eyes, I felt its gaze, intense, ancient, knowing. This was no ordinary spirit. This was something more, something older than the land itself. You have felt it, haven't you? The voice that echoed through my mind was not like the whispers of the spirits. It was deeper, more resonant, like the earth itself speaking. I nodded slowly, unable to speak at first, my mouth dry. The wind around us seemed to grow quieter, though the storm continued to rage in the distance. The figure seemed to be waiting, its presence pressing in on me, as if it were waiting for me to answer. Yes, I finally managed to say. I felt the pulse. It's inside me now. The figure tilted its head, as if considering my words, its shadowy form flickering in and out of focus with the shifting wind. Then it spoke again, its voice softer this time, but no less commanding. You have chosen to carry the heart of the steppes, it said, its tone grave, almost sorrowful. But do you truly understand what that means? Do you understand the weight of the stories you carry? The lives you will affect? I swallowed hard. The weight of the land, the spirits, the pulse. It was all so much to bear, but I had made my choice. I had accepted the responsibility. Still, there was something about the figure before me, something about the way it spoke, that unsettled me, like a truth I hadn't yet grasped. I know the stories are important, I said, my voice shaking despite myself. I know that the dead must be remembered. That's why I have to carry them. But what else is there? What more is there to understand? The figure seemed to smile beneath its hood, though the expression was hidden in the shadows. It raised a hand, and the sand around us began to swirl, twisting in patterns, forming shapes in the air. The figures of the dead, the skeletal nomads with their ethereal ribbons, appeared in the sand, dancing in the storm like figures from a dream. They moved, their bodies flowing with the wind, their movements elegant and haunting, their whispers rising in a chorus. You will carry their stories, the figure said. But the stories are only the beginning. You will carry their fates too. The pulse you feel in your chest is not just the memories of the dead. It is the power of their lives, of their choices. The choices they made in life are written in the land, in the sand, in the bones. And now you are part of that story. I stared at the shifting shapes of the dead, their faces barely visible beneath the cloths and ribbons that trailed behind them. Their eyes dark and empty but filled with sorrow and something deeper, something like regret. The stories they carried were not just tales of the past. They were burdens, questions left unanswered, choices made long ago that had shaped the very land beneath my feet. But I don't understand, I said, the weight of it all pressing down on me. What do you mean? What fate do I carry? What choices were made? The figure took a step closer, and for the first time, I felt a chill in the air, as though the temperature had dropped several degrees in an instant. Its form flickered, and then, in a voice that seemed to vibrate through my very being, it spoke the truth. You are not just a keeper of stories. You are the next choice, the next chapter. The pulse of the steppes lives through you now. You are not just carrying their memories. You are carrying their fate, the fate of the land, the fate of those who walk it, and the fate of those who will come after. The choice is yours. Will you continue their path, or will you break from it? The words hung in the air, the silence thick and suffocating. My heart began to race. The pulse, was it mine to control? Could I change it? Was I truly a bridge between the dead and the living, or was I something more? The choice was mine. I thought of the spirits, their stories, their fates woven into the land like threads in a tapestry. Could I change them? Could I rewrite what had already been written? Could I reshape the steppes, the very heartbeat of the land, into something new? The figure seemed to, sense my turmoil. It stepped back, its form dissolving into the swirling sand, but not before leaving me with one final truth. "Remember," it said softly, its voice barely audible over the wind. "The land is not only shaped by the dead. It is shaped by the choices of the living. The pulse is alive. It grows with every choice you make. And every choice you make will echo through the land, through time. You are the pulse now. You are the heart of the steppes. And you must choose." The figure was gone. The wind had calmed once more, and the desert was silent again, save for the faint rustling of sand in the distance. The pulse in my chest still thumped, steady and strong. But now it was different. It was not just the rhythm of the dead, not just the echo of the past. It was mine. I carried it now. And with it, I carried the weight of their choices. But it wasn't just their choices that mattered now. It was mine. The pulse of the steppes was alive within me, and I would have to decide what to do with it. The air was still, heavy with the weight of the figure's words. The desert seemed to hold its breath, as if the land itself was waiting for something. Waiting for me. I could feel the pulse of the steppes beneath my feet, a rhythm that had once been distant and strange now echoing through my very being. It was a living thing, this pulse. It was not just the rhythm of the dead, nor simply the memory of those who had come before. It was alive in me now, tangled with my own heartbeat, intertwined with my thoughts. I had never asked for this. I had never chosen to become the keeper of the land's pulse, its stories, its fate. But now there was no turning back. The land had chosen me, and in its choice, I had become a part of it. I was a bridge between the living and the dead, between the past and the future. And that bridge was narrowing. I glanced around, the endless stretch of sand and sky seeming both comforting and oppressive at once. I had walked these steppes for so long, searching for answers. But now, the answers had come to me, whispered on the wind, etched into my bones. The weight of the land pressed down on me, and I realized that the question was no longer what I should do. It was what I would do. The figure's words echoed in my mind, the choice that lay ahead of me. The choice felt like a chasm, a precipice that I could not avoid. The dead had passed on their memories, their lives, their regrets to me. But the fate of the steppes, the future of this land, was mine to shape. It was up to me to decide if the pulse would continue, or if I would stop it. Could I break from the pattern of the past? Could I create a new rhythm for the land? Or was I destined to walk in the footsteps of those who had come before me, bound to carry their legacy until it consumed me? I took a deep breath and began walking again, though now, the land felt different beneath my feet. The pulse in my chest was louder, more insistent, as if it were drawing me deeper into the heart of the steppes. And so I followed it. The sky above was darkening now, the stars coming to life one by one. But there was something else in the air. Something strange, something that had begun to stir beneath the sand. I could feel it, an energy, a presence, moving beneath the earth, just out of reach. The pulse was growing stronger, the land itself awakening in response to my every step. I walked for what felt like hours, the wind picking up again, though it no longer felt cold. There was warmth in the air, a heat that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. The pulse grew with each step, vibrating through my chest until it was all I could hear, all I could feel. The land was alive with it, humming beneath my feet, thrumming in my veins. And then, ahead of me, I saw it, a shimmer on the horizon. At first, I thought it was a mirage, the haze of the desert playing tricks on my eyes. But as I drew closer, the shape became clearer. It was a figure, tall and thin, standing motionless in the middle of the vast emptiness. A figure draped in tattered cloth, its face hidden by a hood. The figure did not move as I approached, but I could feel its presence, like a force in the air, pressing down on me. The pulse surged in my chest, as if responding to the figure's presence. This was no ordinary traveler, no wayfarer lost in the desert. This was something else, something older. I stopped several paces away, feeling the weight of the land, of the pulse, pushing me toward the figure. It stood there, waiting for me, silent as the wind. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice hoarse from the journey, from the weight of the questions pressing on my mind. The figure did not respond at first. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, as if studying me. Then, its voice, a voice that seemed to echo not from its mouth, but from the very earth itself, answered. I am the one who has waited, it said. I am the pulse you carry, the choices you make, the heart of the land. The words were not just a statement, they were a truth. The pulse in my chest stuttered in recognition, and I took a step closer, my heart pounding. I had known it even before the figure spoke. This was the heart of the steppes. This was the place, the moment, where all things converged, the past, the present, and the future. The place where the choice would be made. What am I supposed to do? I asked, the question tumbling out before I could stop it. My voice cracked, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The figure did not answer immediately, but I felt it. Felt the land responding to my question, as if the very air around us were waiting, holding its breath. You already know, the figure replied, its voice soft now, almost a whisper. You have felt the pulse. You carry it with you. The choice is already made. The land has chosen. I shook my head, confusion flooding my mind. But I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know what it means. The figure stepped forward, its movement fluid, its form shifting with the wind. The pulse is not just memory, it said. It is not just the stories of those who have gone before. It is life. It is the choices of the living, the choices of those who walk the land, and the choices yet to come. I took another step back, my thoughts spinning. So, if I carry the pulse, I carry the choices of the living too? The future. Yes, the figure said. The pulse is not just a thread of the past. It is the future, and it is yours to shape. The fate of the steppes is in your hands now. I felt a deep, uncomfortable weight in my chest, as though the very weight of the future were pressing down on me. This was the truth. The pulse, the heartbeat of the land, was mine to carry, and with it, I carried the choices of the future. The steppes were not just a place of memory. They were a place of creation, a place where the future would be born. The figure's presence was overwhelming now, filling the air with its weight. You will shape the land. You will shape the stories. The past is written, but the future is yours to create. The words echoed in my mind, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of the responsibility I had taken on. It was not just about remembering the dead. It was not just about carrying their stories. It was about choosing what the steppes would become. The wind howled again, and the pulse surged within me, louder now, as if it were urging me to act, to make a decision. I stood there, frozen, feeling the weight of the land beneath my feet. The steppes had chosen me, and I would choose it in return. The wind howled through the desert, the pulse in my chest throbbing louder, faster. It was no longer a gentle rhythm but a roar, a force that echoed through the very marrow of my bones. The figure in front of me, this presence, this embodiment of the land's heartbeat, stood motionless, its form shifting like a mirage in the desert's unforgiving light. The weight of its gaze pressed down on me, and I realized with a deep, sinking feeling that the moment had arrived. The choice. It wasn't just a decision. It wasn't just about carrying the pulse, about keeping the stories of the dead alive. It was about shaping the future, about deciding the fate of the steppes, of the land itself, and of those who would come after me. The weight of the past was heavy, but the weight of the future, of the land that would rise or fall because of what I chose, was unbearable. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. The wind had stopped howling, but I could feel it still, a low hum beneath my skin, urging me to act. The figure didn't move. It was waiting. It had always been waiting. The land had been waiting. The pulse had been waiting. And now I had to make the choice. What happens if I choose wrong? The question slipped from my lips before I could stop it. My voice cracked, raw with fear, with uncertainty. The weight of the decision felt crushing, the enormity of it nearly suffocating. The figure's shadowed face remained hidden, but I felt its gaze, felt it looking deep into me, searching. Then, it spoke, its voice resonating in my chest like the rumble of thunder, deep and unsettling. There is no wrong choice, only consequences. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of centuries, of 1,000 lives lived and lost beneath the sun. The pulse is not just a gift, it is a burden. Every choice made, every step taken, ripples through time. What you choose will shape the land, but it will also shape you. The future will be different, but it will never be free from the past. I swallowed hard. The spirits that had whispered in my mind, the figures of the dead who had guided me, they had never spoken of the weight of consequences. They had never told me that the pulse I carried would change me, that it would change everything. But it made sense in a way. How could something as powerful as the pulse, as the heartbeat of the land, not come with its own price? I could feel it in my chest, the pulse beating faster now, as if urging me to make my decision, to act. The land was waiting. The steppes, with their endless expanse of sand and forgotten stories, were waiting for me to shape them, for me to decide what they would become. How do I know what's right? I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. How do I know if I'm making the right choice? The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, the air around us grew heavier, the wind picking up again, swirling around us in great gusts that kicked up the sand at our feet. The figure raised a hand, and with a single motion, the sand before us began to shift, forming patterns, shapes, as if the land itself were being molded by unseen hands. The sand formed into images, fleeting and strange, visions of people, of nomads walking beneath the sun, of cities long forgotten, of battles fought and lost, of faces half forgotten by time. You will not find the answer in words, the figure said. The answer is in the land, in the pulse you carry. The land has already made its choice, just as you have already made yours. The question is not whether you are ready. The question is whether you will accept what you have become. The words struck me like a blow to the chest. I had already made my choice. I had already taken the pulse, felt its weight, listened to its call. The choice wasn't in what I would do, but in how I would carry it. The figure stepped forward, its form shifting, its presence growing more intense. The sand around us began to swirl, rising into the air, creating a whirlwind of dust and light. The vision before me, of those who had come before, flickered and shifted, blending into one another. Faces of nomads, of spirits, of warriors, of mothers and fathers, all walking the land with their burdens. You will walk among them now, the figure said, its voice almost sorrowful, yet filled with a strange kind of reverence. You will carry their weight, their memories, but you will also carry their fate. The pulse is not just a song of the dead. It is a song of the living, and it is alive in you. The words echoed in the air, and I realized then that the pulse was not just about memory. It was about life, the living and the dead, the choices made, the paths taken. The past was alive in the present, and the future would be shaped by what I did now. The whirlwind of sand began to die down, and the air grew still once more. The figure was fading, its form dissolving into the desert, but I could feel it still, a presence that would not leave me, not ever. You will know when the time comes, it said, its voice fading like the wind. The pulse will guide you. And then it was gone. I stood alone again in the desert, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The pulse in my chest had quieted, but it was still there, still alive, still beating. The land had chosen me and I had chosen it. The future was mine to shape, but the past would never be far behind. The land was waiting, but so was the world beyond the steppes. The fate of the steppes was in my hands, and it was time to decide what that fate would be. I took a deep breath and began to walk, my footsteps steady, the pulse in my chest thumping in time with my heart. The land had spoken. The choice had been made. And now it was time to carry the pulse forward. The desert was quiet now, the winds settling into a stillness that felt almost unnatural. The vast expanse of sand stretched out in every direction, seemingly endless, a canvas waiting for something to shape it. I could feel the pulse in my chest, its rhythm steady and strong, like the heartbeat of the land itself. It wasn't just the land's pulse anymore. It was mine. And with it came a responsibility, a weight that I could never undo. As I walked, the path ahead of me seemed to blur, the world around me slipping in and out of focus. The spirits, those voices that had whispered to me, were silent now. But I could feel them, their presence lingering in the wind, in the air, in the very dust beneath my feet. They had given me the pulse. They had passed their stories on to me. And now it was up to me to carry them forward. But the choice that I had made, how would it manifest? What would it look like? Would the land shift beneath my feet? Would I see the world through new eyes? Feel the pulse in ways that would change everything? I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew this. The future of the steppes was no longer just an idea. It was alive in me. Every step I took, every decision I made, would echo through the land, rippling out into the world like waves on water. The path before me was open, the horizon stretching out, the sky a deep, endless blue. But there was something else now, something beneath the surface of the land, a deep tremor that I could feel in the air. The pulse hadn't quieted. It had only grown stronger, more insistent. It was as if the land were alive now, awake and waiting, aware of what was to come. Ahead of me, the sand shifted, and I saw something emerge from the horizon. A figure, tall and broad, walking toward me with purpose. At first, it looked like a mirage, the heat of the desert warping its shape, making it seem distant and untouchable. But as I drew closer, the figure became clearer. It was a man, or at least what had once been a man. His skin was dark and weathered by the sun, his body wrapped in tattered cloth, his eyes burning with a fierce light that seemed to shine from within. His face was half covered by a scarf, but his posture was regal, as though he were a king of the desert itself. He walked toward me, his steps steady, measured, each footfall leaving a faint imprint in the sand that quickly faded, swallowed by the desert's insatiable hunger. As he approached, I could feel the pulse of the steppes thrum in the air between us, vibrating through the ground, the wind, the very fabric of the land. It was a presence I had not felt before, something ancient, something deep. The man stopped a few paces away, his eyes locking onto mine with a gaze that pierced straight through me. For a long moment, we stood there in silence, the weight of the desert pressing in on us. "You carry it," he said at last, his voice gravelly, like the sound of stones scraping against stone. "The pulse, the heart of the land." I nodded, though I didn't say anything. How could I explain it? How could I tell him what I had come to understand? That the pulse wasn't just a song of the dead, but a force that lived within me now. A force that would shape the world around me, just as it had shaped the steppes for eons. The man stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "The land has waited long enough," he said, his voice softer now, almost like a whisper. "But the choice is not just yours to make. The steppes are alive with it, alive with all the souls that have walked this land, all the choices that have been made. You carry their weight, their fate." I clenched my fists, feeling the pulse race in my chest. I had heard these words before, the weight of the land, the burden of the choices made by those who had come before me. But hearing it from this man, this figure of the desert, made it feel real, made it feel immediate. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, though the question carried the weight of everything I had learned. The man's lips curled into a slight smile, though there was no warmth in it. "What I want is for you to understand. Understand that the land does not belong to the dead alone. It belongs to the living as well. To you. You are the one who will shape its future, but that future cannot exist without the past. The past will always echo through you. The pulse will always beat within you." His words were like a hammer, driving deep into my chest. The pulse had never been just a force of memory. It was the foundation of the land, the heart of everything that had come before and everything that would come after. My role was not to erase the past, not to rewrite it, but to carry it forward. The land needed the pulse. It needed the choices of those who had walked it before. You cannot escape the past, the man continued, his gaze steady. It is woven into the very fabric of the land. And now, it is woven into you. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his words settle over me like a cloak. The pulse was not something I could turn off. It was not something I could control. It was a part of me now, and it was a part of the land, alive, beating, growing with each choice I made. When I opened my eyes, the man was still standing there, waiting. But now there was something else in his eyes, a quiet understanding. He knew that I had heard his words. He knew that I had understood. I came to the steppes, I said, my voice hoarse, to remember the dead, to give them a place to rest, a place to be remembered. The man nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. And you will do that, but you will also carry the living, the future. The choices you make will echo through the land, and the land will answer. I looked out at the horizon, the endless stretch of sand and sky before me, and for the first time I understood. This was not just about the past. It was not just about remembering the dead. It was about the living. It was about carrying the pulse of the land forward, allowing it to grow, to evolve, to shape the future. The past would never be forgotten, but it was up to me to choose what came next. The man took a step back, his form beginning to shimmer in the light, as if the desert itself was swallowing him whole. Before he disappeared completely, he spoke one last time. The pulse is not just a burden. It is a gift. Use it wisely. And with that, he was gone, leaving nothing behind but the wind and the endless, waiting desert. I stood there for a long time, staring at the horizon, feeling the pulse still echoing in my chest, vibrating through my body, through the land. The choice was mine, but it was not mine alone. It was the choice of the past, the present, and the future. The land had chosen me, but I was not alone in carrying its heart. The living would shape the land too, and they would shape me. The journey ahead was not clear, but I knew one thing now. I was ready to carry the pulse forward, to walk the path that lay before me. I was ready to shape the future of the steppes. And whatever came next, I would face it. The desert seemed to stretch further than ever before, an infinite sea of sand and silence that swallowed everything. Even the stars above felt distant, cold, like ancient eyes watching from the farthest reaches of time. The wind was still, though I could feel it stirring beneath the surface, ready to rise again, ready to speak. It was as though the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make the next move. I continued walking, the pulse in my chest steady but strong. It had become a part of me now, an ever-present thrum that I could feel in my bones, in my blood. The land's heartbeat had merged with my own, and I could feel the weight of it in every step I took. The spirits were quiet, their whispers now a soft murmur, like an echo of something long past. But I knew they were still there, watching, waiting. They had given me their stories, their memories, and their choices. Now it was up to me to carry them forward. But the man's words echoed in my mind. The pulse is not just a burden. It is a gift. A gift. Could it be? Could something so heavy, so full of responsibility, truly be a gift? Or had I simply been given a task too great to understand, too deep to grasp? The weight of the land, the memories of the dead, the fate of the living. Could I truly shape it all? Could I choose what came next for the steppes, for the world beyond? The pulse inside me felt alive, as though it were whispering its own answers. But the more I listened, the more uncertain I became. The land was waiting, but for what? Was it waiting for me to save it? Or was it waiting for me to ruin it? The answers were not clear. I reached the crest of a dune, the land stretching out before me, endless and wide, a vast desert of unbroken sand. I paused there, looking out over the horizon, feeling the weight of the pulse, feeling the land's presence pressing down on me, urging me to make my choice. For a long time, I simply stood there, watching the play of light and shadow over the dunes, the way the sun dipped low in the sky, casting the world in hues of orange and gold. The desert was beautiful, yes, but it was also unforgiving. The wind could shift in an instant, a storm could rise from nowhere, The heat could burn you alive before you had a chance to take cover. The steppes had shaped me, but I had been shaped by them too. And now they were calling me to shape them further. I took a deep breath and turned away from the horizon. There was no time to stand still. The pulse would not wait. As I walked, the world seemed to shift. The air grew colder, the wind stirring up grains of sand that danced in the air like ghostly memories. For a moment, I thought I saw something move in the distance. A figure, dark and fleeting, just out of reach. I stopped, my heart pounding. But when I looked again, there was nothing. Still, the feeling lingered. The land was not empty. It was filled with memories, with whispers, with ghosts that had never truly passed. The spirits were here, watching, waiting. And then a sound. A low rumble beneath my feet. I froze, my heart racing. The pulse in my chest beat faster, the land itself responding, vibrating with an energy I had never felt before. The ground beneath me trembled, like the earth itself was waking up, stretching after a long sleep. The sand shifted, rising in swirling patterns, twisting into shapes that seemed almost alive. The wind picked up again, howling through the dunes, but this time it wasn't just the desert wind. It was something else, something ancient, something powerful. It carried with it a voice, a whispering, unintelligible murmur, like the voices of thousands speaking at once. I stepped back, my pulse racing. I had heard the whispers before, but this felt different. This was not just the spirits of the dead. This was something older, something more primal. The land was alive in a way I hadn't fully understood until now. It wasn't just memories that swirled in the wind, not just echoes of those who had passed. It was the land itself, its very soul calling out, asking for something. The sand began to shift more violently, rising higher, swirling around me like a vortex. I could feel the pulse in my chest, growing louder, matching the rhythm of the storm. And then, in the center of the vortex, I saw it, a shape, a figure emerging from the shifting sands. It was a woman, tall and regal, her body wrapped in flowing cloth that shimmered like starlight. Her eyes were dark, deep pools that seemed to hold the weight of the entire desert, the weight of all its secrets. She stood before me, her presence so powerful that it felt as though the land itself bent in deference to her. She spoke, her voice like the wind, soft yet commanding, filled with an ancient authority. "You carry the pulse," she said, her gaze fixed on me. "You carry the heart of the steppes, but you have yet to understand what that truly means." I swallowed hard, trying to speak, but no words came. The storm around us was still raging, the sand swirling around her like an unstoppable force, but she remained still, unyielding. "You have heard the whispers," she continued, her eyes never leaving mine. "You have felt the weight of the past, the pressure of the future. But you have not yet seen what lies beneath the surface." Her words sent a chill through me. I had felt the pulse, had carried the weight of the dead and the living. I had understood that I was part of something greater, something that spanned beyond the bounds of time. But what did she mean by what lies beneath the surface? The woman stepped closer, her feet barely touching the ground as she moved. "The pulse you carry is not just a force of life and death. It is the pulse of creation, of change. It is the heartbeat of the world itself." I took a step back, my mind racing. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice strained. "I thought the pulse was a memory, a story, a choice made by those who walked this land before me." She nodded, but her expression was sad, as if she had known the truth all along. "It is all those things, but it is also the power to shape, the power to create, to destroy, to change. The pulse is not just a song. It is the foundation of all things. The past, the present, and the future all are shaped by the pulse." The words sank into me like a weight. The pulse wasn't just about remembering the dead. It wasn't just about carrying the stories of those who had gone before. It was the very heartbeat of creation. It was the force that shaped everything, the land, the lives, the very world itself. I closed my eyes, the enormity of it all crashing over me. The pulse was not just a burden. It was not just a gift. It was the power to change, to shape, to create. And that power, my power, was not something I could take lightly. When I opened my eyes again, the woman was gone, her form dissolving into the swirling sand. The storm calmed, the wind dying down as quickly as it had risen, leaving nothing behind but the quiet hum of the pulse inside me. The land was still, but I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The choice was mine, and it was time to decide how I would shape the land. The pulse was not just a rhythm. It was a force, a power that could reshape everything. The dead, the living, the future, it was all within my grasp. And now the real journey was beginning. The desert, now eerily calm, felt like a vast expanse of possibility. Each grain of sand, each gust of wind a reminder of the weight of what I had learned. The pulse inside me was steady, but its power, its potential was more overwhelming than ever. I could feel it swirling beneath my skin, rippling through my veins like a force that could reshape the world itself. But the question was no longer what I could do. It was what should I do? The pulse was a gift, yes, but it was also a responsibility I hadn't fully understood until now. The woman, the figure in the sandstorm, had made that clear. The pulse was not just about remembering the past. It was the foundation of creation itself. The land, the world, everything was shaped by it, shaped by the choices of those who carried it. I could feel it now, the weight of the decision pressing on me like a physical force. The pulse was mine to guide, but what direction would I take it? Would I use its power to preserve the land as it was? Or would I reshape it entirely, forging a new future? One where the past, though not forgotten, was not the defining force. As I stood there, surrounded by the vast emptiness of the steppes, I felt the land's presence more clearly than ever before. It wasn't just the pulse, it was the history, the lives that had been lived here. Every grain of sand held a memory. Every gust of wind carried a whisper. The spirits were everywhere, woven into the land, into the pulse itself. But was that enough? Was it enough to carry their memories forward? Or did the world need something more? I looked down at the sand beneath my feet, the fine grains shifting slightly with the breeze. It had always been like this, the land, the pulse, the ghosts of the past, but now I could feel it all differently. It wasn't just a memory. It was a living thing. It wanted something. It needed something. And I had the power to give it. The wind picked up again, and I could feel the pulse in my chest responding to it, thrumming with the rhythm of the land, its heartbeat synchronizing with mine. The land was alive in a way I hadn't fully realized until now. It was alive and it was waiting. I began walking again, my steps slow but purposeful. The pulse was in me, in every step, in every breath I took. The weight of the past, the weight of those who had come before, hung on my shoulders, but there was something else now, something new. A sense of purpose, of direction, like the pulse was pointing me toward something. What was it? The answer was just out of reach, a feeling that danced on the edge of my mind but refused to come into focus. The steps were changing, I could feel it, and I was the one who would change them. But how? What would I create? What would I destroy? The land was waiting, and the pulse was waiting for me to decide. I could feel it in every grain of sand, in every gust of wind, in every breath of the desert air. It was all connected, the past, the present, the future, and it was mine to shape. I climbed to the top of the next dune and paused, staring out at the endless horizon. The steppes stretched out before me, vast and unbroken, the sun beginning to dip below the edge of the world. The sky turned from blue to shades of purple and orange, the last rays of light painting the desert in gold. And then, something shifted. The land itself seemed to move. The sand, once still, began to shift and ripple as if responding to the pulse, to my very presence. It was as though the desert itself was alive, not just with the memories of the past, but with the promise of the future. I felt the pulse in my chest, stronger now, guiding me, pushing me. The winds began to swirl again, but this time they weren't the frantic, chaotic gusts of before. No, these winds were different. They were purposeful. They were pulling me forward, urging me to move, to choose, to act. I took a step forward, my heart pounding. The pulse was guiding me. The land was calling to me. It wasn't just the past. It wasn't just the dead. It was the future that I would create. The pulse was more than a memory. It was a force of change, a force of creation, and it had been waiting for someone to wield it. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the winds whip around me, feeling the pulse within me, strong and sure. When I opened my eyes again, I knew what I had to do. The past could not be erased. The dead could not be forgotten. But the future was not set. It was mine to shape, and it was time to make my mark on the world. I turned and began walking, not toward the horizon, but deeper into the heart of the steppes, where the pulse had begun. The land trembled beneath my feet, and the winds followed me, swirling around me in a vortex of sand and power. The pulse was alive in me, and it was alive in the land. The world was changing, and I was the one who would change it. I could feel the eyes of the dead upon me, the weight of their expectations, their hopes. But I could also feel something else, the weight of the future, the weight of the living, the weight of all those who would come after me. The pulse was theirs as much as it was mine. The journey ahead would not be easy. The land would test me as it had tested all those who had walked it before. The choices I made would not be without consequence. But I was ready. I had no choice but to be. The pulse had chosen me. The land had chosen me. And now I would choose the future. The air was thick now, heavy with the weight of decisions that had yet to be made, choices that hung in the balance. Each step I took felt as though it were stirring something ancient beneath the sand. The pulse in my chest had settled into a steady rhythm, but it felt like the beat of something much larger. A song that was both mine and not mine, ancient yet born anew with every breath. I had crossed the threshold, stepping into the heart of the steppes, the place where the pulse began and where all paths seemed to converge. The winds had shifted. The land had changed. It was no longer just a barren desert. It was a living, breathing entity. The sands beneath my feet seemed to shift with purpose, as if the earth itself was guiding me, pulling me toward something. Ahead, the horizon was blurred by the heat of the setting sun. But there was something else on the wind now, a distant sound, faint yet unmistakable, a hum, like a whisper carried by the breeze, or the distant beating of drums. It was a call, an invitation, a summons that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I stopped, standing still on the crest of the dune, the wind howling around me as the pulse surged within me, as though it were calling me to something more. The hum grew louder, clearer, resonating deep within me. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over me, feeling it vibrate through the very core of my being. And then, a shape emerged from the heat waves in the distance, like a mirage coming to life. It was a figure, walking slowly toward me, its form shifting and flickering as though it existed between worlds. The hum was coming from this figure, I realized, the pulse vibrating with it. It was a woman, draped in flowing robes that shimmered with the colors of the desert, her face obscured by a veil of sand and dust. She moved with grace, as though she were part of the land itself, her every step a part of the rhythm of the world. The hum grew stronger as she drew nearer, and I felt the pulse in my chest respond to her, as though it recognized her presence. When she was close enough, she stopped, standing before me in silence, her eyes hidden behind the veil. Her presence was overwhelming, a force that seemed to command the very wind itself. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if the world had paused, holding its breath, waiting for something. Finally, she spoke, her voice a soft, melodic hum that seemed to resonate in the air around us. "You carry the pulse," she said, her words simple but laden with meaning. "You walk the land with it. You feel it in your bones, in your blood. You have chosen to carry it forward. But do you truly understand what it means?" I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words sink deep into my chest. "I understand that the pulse is a force of life, a force of creation. It is the heart of the land, the heartbeat of the world. But I don't know if I understand everything about it. I don't know if I understand how to carry it or what it means for the future." She nodded slowly, as if she had expected this answer. The pulse is not just a force of life. It is a force of change. The land is not what it once was, and neither are you. The choice you make will determine the path that lies ahead, not just for the steps, but for all who live upon it. I felt a chill run down my spine. The weight of her words pressed heavily upon me. I could feel the pulse beneath my skin, thrumming in time with my heartbeat, and I knew that what she said was true. The future was mine to shape. But what would I do with it? What should I do with it? How do I know what path to take? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper, carried away by the wind. She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming, as though the very desert had gathered around us. The path is not for you to choose alone. You carry the pulse, but you are not the only one who shapes it. The land, the spirits, the past, they all have a part to play in the choices you make. You must listen to them. You must feel them. Her words resonated deep within me, the pulse quickening in response, as if acknowledging the truth of what she said. The pulse wasn't just mine. It was the land's. It was the spirits. It was the voices of those who had come before me and the hearts of those who would come after. The future wasn't mine to decide in isolation. It was a collective force, a shared rhythm that needed to be heard. But even with this realization, the question remained, what should I do with it? You are the bridge, the woman said, her voice a whisper now, barely audible against the rising wind. The pulse flows through you, but it is not for you alone. It is for the land, for the future, the dead, the living. They are all tied together by it, all bound to the same rhythm. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of thoughts that raged inside me. I had always known that the pulse was powerful, that it carried the weight of the past. But now I understood. The pulse was not just a weight. It was a thread that tied all things together, living and dead, past and future. And it was mine to carry. I stepped forward, the sand shifting beneath my feet as I moved closer to the woman. And how do I carry it? I asked, the question heavy in the air between us. How do I carry the pulse of the land and of the people, when I don't even know what direction to go? She reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was light, but it burned like fire, as though her very essence was passing into me. You will know when the time comes. You will feel it. The pulse will guide you, just as the land will guide you. But you must listen. You must trust in it. Trust in the land, and trust in yourself. I nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in my mind. How could I trust something I couldn't fully understand? The pulse, the land, the spirits, they were all intertwined, all a part of something far greater than I could see. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps the trust wasn't in knowing every answer, but in feeling the path unfold before me, one step at a time. The woman's form began to flicker, her presence fading with the wind. Before she vanished completely, she spoke one last time, her voice like a soft breeze. You are not alone, child of the pulse. The land will speak, and you will hear it. The future will be shaped by the choices you make, but it will also be shaped by the choices of those who walk with you. Listen. And then she was gone. The wind died down, and the sand settled around me. The pulse inside me slowed, the rhythm steady once more, as though it were content with the promise I had made. The land was silent again, but I could still feel it, still feel the hum beneath my skin, the pulse of creation and change. I looked out over the steppes, the vast expanse of sand stretching out before me. The future was wide open, and though the road ahead was unclear, I knew one thing. I was not alone. The pulse was with me, and the land was with me. The past and the future were bound together, and I was the bridge between them. And now it was time to begin the journey. The wind began to stir again, rising from the depths of the steppes, sweeping across the dunes with a kind of intent. It was as though the land itself had awoken from a deep slumber, and with each gust, it whispered 1,000 secrets to the desert's heart, secrets that I could feel swirling in my chest. I stood at the edge of the dune, looking out at the horizon, my mind racing. The woman's words had sunk deep into me. You are the bridge. She had said it so simply, yet it resonated like a bell that could never stop ringing. The pulse that flowed through me was not just mine to carry. It was something larger. It belonged to the land, to the spirits of the dead, to the living, to the future. I was merely a conduit, an intermediary between all that had come before and all that would come after. And yet, the weight of it was mine to bear. I could feel it now, the pulse. It was stronger than before, its rhythm intertwined with the beat of my own heart, a constant presence beneath my skin, under my bones. It had taken root in me, become a part of me, and now it demanded that I listen to it. The land was no longer just an expanse of sand and stone. It was alive, breathing, waiting for something to unfold, something that would change the very fabric of existence. The sun had nearly set, and the first stars began to pierce the darkening sky, cold and distant. The winds swept across the steppes, carving patterns in the sand, as though tracing the path that I would take. The land seemed to whisper, urging me onward. I turned away from the horizon and began walking, not knowing where I was going, but trusting that the pulse would guide me, that the land would show me the way. Each step I took felt more deliberate, more certain. The sands shifted beneath my feet, the ground beneath me alive with a subtle, pulsing energy that was both foreign and familiar. As I moved deeper into the steppes, the air grew colder, and the wind seemed to grow heavier, as if the very atmosphere itself was charged with something ancient. The pulse within me quickened in response, as though it too sensed the change in the air. Something was coming. Something was drawing near, and I could feel it in the depths of my bones. I came to a stop at the crest of a high dune. The world spread out before me in all its vastness. And there, in the distance, I saw it. A figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. It was a man, tall and broad, walking slowly toward me. His figure was outlined by the fading light, and as he drew closer, I could feel the air shift around him, thick with an energy that matched the pulse inside me. He was unlike any man I had ever seen. His skin dark and weathered by time, his hair long and silver, like threads of moonlight. His eyes were the color of the deepest night, black as the void itself, and when he looked at me, it felt as though he could see through me, past the skin and bone, into the very core of my being. He moved with the grace of someone who had walked these lands for centuries, as if the desert itself bent to his will. When he was close enough, he stopped, standing still in the shifting sand. His presence was overpowering, like the weight of the earth itself rested on his shoulders. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, but I could feel the pulse between us, connecting us, like an invisible thread. His gaze was intense, his face unreadable. "You have come," he said at last, his voice deep and resonant, a sound like distant thunder. "The pulse has called you, as it calls all those who carry its weight." I nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. The pulse inside me thrummed in response, as if acknowledging his words. "I carry it," I said, my voice tight with the gravity of it. "But I do not know where it is leading me. I do not know what it wants." The man studied me for a long moment, his gaze unblinking. "The pulse does not want anything. It is a force of creation, of change. It flows through the land, through the living and the dead. It is neither good nor evil, but it has shaped the world since the beginning of time. What it requires of you is not to understand it, but to listen to it and to walk with it." I felt a shiver run through me at his words. "But how? How do I listen to something so vast?" He stepped forward, his movements deliberate and slow, each step leaving a faint mark in the sand, as though he were etching his presence into the world itself. "The pulse speaks in many ways. It speaks through the wind, through the sand, through the silence. It speaks through the spirits of the past and the cries of the living. It is in every breath you take, every step you make. But you must learn to listen not with your ears, but with your soul." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The weight of his words settled over me like a storm cloud, and for the first time, I realized how little I truly understood. The pulse was not just a heartbeat, not just a rhythm. It was a force of nature, a power that flowed through everything, and I was only beginning to feel its depth. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice hoarse, my chest tight with 1,000 unanswered questions. The man's eyes softened, though his expression remained serious. "I do not want anything from you," he said. "I am not here to guide you. I am here to show you that the path you walk is your own to choose. The pulse will guide you, but it is you who must decide how to wield it. Whether you use it to shape the land, to heal it, or to destroy it, that choice is yours." The weight of his words hit me like a hammer. The power of the pulse was not simply to be carried, it was to be used, to be directed. The land, the spirits, the future, they were all connected by it, by the choices I would make. And though the land itself would support me, it would also test me, just as it had tested all those before me. "You must understand this," the man continued, his voice low but firm. "The pulse is not just a tool, nor is it a gift. It is a responsibility, a choice. You are not the first to walk this path, and you will not be the last. The spirits, the land, they have all shaped the world as much as you will. And your choices will shape what comes after you." I felt the pulse inside me surge, a deep, throbbing sensation that seemed to radiate outward, echoing through the sand, through the wind, through the very earth beneath me. It was alive, and it was waiting for something. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly as the realization began to settle over me. The man smiled, a rare and fleeting expression. "I am a keeper," he said simply, "a guardian of the pulse. And I have walked this land for as long as the pulse has flowed through it." The weight of his words sank in. The pulse was ancient. It had been here since the beginning, and it would continue long after I was gone. I was but a fleeting moment in the endless flow of time, a single thread in the tapestry of life and death, creation and destruction. And yet, in this moment, the pulse was mine to wield. The land, the spirits, the past, they were all waiting for me to choose. "I will listen," I said finally, my voice steady now, the pulse in my chest vibrating in harmony with my words. "I will listen and I will choose." The man nodded, a slight nod of approval. "Then walk the path you are given, and know that you do not walk alone." And with that, he turned and began to walk away, his figure fading into the desert's vastness, as if he had never been there at all. I stood alone, the pulse within me thrumming louder now, as though it had been waiting for me to hear it. The winds kicked up again, swirling the sand around me in patterns that seemed to form and dissolve in an endless dance. The desert stretched before me, an empty canvas, waiting for me to shape it. The future was mine to decide. I stood in the desert, the pulse still thrumming through me, an undeniable rhythm that echoed like a heartbeat in the stillness of the land. The winds shifted around me, carrying the scent of something distant, something lost. The air was heavy with expectation, as though the steppes themselves were waiting for me to make my move. The man, the keeper, was gone now, vanished into the horizon, his presence already fading like a dream I couldn't quite remember. But his words lingered, pressing against my chest, heavy and undeniable. The pulse is a choice, a responsibility, a force that shapes the world. I took a step forward, the sand shifting beneath my feet, each movement feeling like a declaration. The pulse thrummed deeper inside me, alive and vibrant, as though it were calling me to the next stage of this journey, urging me onward. But where? And more importantly, why? I had come here to understand, to unlock the mysteries of the land, to find the truth of the pulse. But now that I knew, now that I had touched it, felt it in my blood, I was no closer to understanding what it truly meant. The pulse was both a burden and a gift, a force of creation and destruction. It was the lifeblood of the land, the rhythm of the past, the heartbeat of the future. And it was mine to wield. The wind howled around me again, carrying with it the distant echo of whispers, the voices of those who had come before. The spirits, I could feel their presence, not just as memories or fragments of time, but as something alive. They were here, watching, waiting. I closed my eyes, letting the wind whip through my hair, letting it carry me into the storm of thoughts that churned in my mind. What did I need to do? What did the pulse require of me? Could I shape the land, as the keeper had said? Could I truly wield its power to create or destroy? The ground beneath me trembled slightly, and I opened my eyes to see a figure standing at the edge of the dune, silhouetted against the darkening sky. It was another figure, taller than the first, cloaked in robes of deep black that billowed around them like smoke. Their face was hidden beneath a shadowed hood, but I could feel their presence. Their energy was different from the keeper's. It was colder, more distant, as though they were not of the same world at all. They took a step forward, their movements fluid and graceful, like the shifting sands. The pulse inside me thrummed in response, but it was not the same rhythm as before. This was something darker. The air seemed to grow heavier with each step they took. When they reached me, they stopped, standing silently as though they were waiting for something. The wind whipped around us, the sand swirling in patterns that seemed to shift and change at their command. "You carry the pulse?" the figure said, their voice low and haunting, like the echo of something forgotten. "But do you understand its true nature?" I swallowed hard, the weight of their words pressing against me. The pulse had been a force I thought I understood, but now I realized that I had only scratched the surface. What was its true nature? What more was there to learn? I'm still trying to understand, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know it is powerful. I know it shapes the world. But I don't know what it wants from me. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it." The figure remained silent for a moment, as though considering my words. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, they reached up and removed their hood, revealing a face that was pale and drawn, their eyes dark pools that seemed to reflect the very void of the desert itself. There was no warmth in them, only an endless, cold depth. They were older than the keeper, ancient even, their very presence a reminder of the vastness of time. "You have much to learn," they said, their voice like the rustle of dead leaves. "But you are not the first to carry the pulse, nor will you be the last. It has chosen you, yes, but it has chosen many before you, and many of those who came before you have failed." Failed? The word sent a shiver down my spine. How? What happened to them? The figure's eyes darkened, and I could feel the pulse in my chest falter, as though it had been struck by a sudden, violent jolt. The pulse does not simply shape the world. It tests those who carry it, tests their will, their heart. It reveals the true nature of the bearer, for better or for worse. I took a step back, my heart racing. "What do you mean? What happens if I fail?" The figure's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "If you fail, the land will change, but not for the better. It will wither. It will burn. The pulse will no longer be a force of creation. It will become a force of destruction, a force of death." The weight of their words struck me like a blow. The pulse, the very thing that I had come to understand as a lifeblood of the world, could turn on me, could become a weapon, a harbinger of ruin. "But I don't want that," I said, the words desperate, my mind racing. "I don't want to destroy the land. I want to shape it. I want to protect it." The figure stepped forward, their presence like a shadow that engulfed me. "Then you must learn to listen to the pulse, not just with your mind, but with your soul. The pulse does not simply grant power, it tests the heart. It reveals the truth of who you are. If you carry it with selfishness, with fear, with arrogance, it will tear you apart." I swallowed hard, the gravity of their words settling over me like a shroud. I felt the pulse within me, thrumming with an intensity that made my entire body vibrate. The weight of the responsibility was suffocating. How could I carry this? How could I shape the world when I could barely understand its true nature? "You have a choice," the figure continued, their voice now a whisper, as though the very wind was speaking through them. "The pulse is not just a gift. It is a curse. It will either forge your future, or it will destroy you. And it will do the same to the land, to all who live upon it. The question is not whether you can control it, but whether you can resist its temptation." I stared at the figure, my heart pounding in my chest. "What temptation?" They paused, their gaze piercing into me. The temptation to wield the pulse for your own gain. The temptation to reshape the world to your desires, to force the land to bend to your will. If you give in to that temptation, you will lose yourself. And the land will die with you. I felt my knees tremble beneath me, the weight of the pulse pressing down on me, the land shifting beneath my feet as though the earth itself was watching. The figure turned, their form becoming a shadow once more. "Choose wisely," they said softly, their voice fading into the wind. "For once the pulse is taken, there is no turning back." And just like that, they were gone, leaving me standing alone on the dune, the pulse inside me still thrumming, louder now, demanding something of me. The wind picked up again, and I stood there, feeling the land beneath me, feeling the weight of the choice that lay ahead. The future was wide open, but now I understood more than ever that the path I took would not just shape my fate. It would shape the fate of the entire world. And it would all depend on whether I could resist the pulse's call to power, to destruction. The land was waiting, and so was the future. The pulse within me hummed, insistent and deep, as though it were alive with its own desires, its own hunger. I could feel it pressing against the walls of my chest, tugging at the edges of my consciousness. The figure's words lingered in my mind, like a warning etched into the air, a truth I could no longer escape. The pulse is a curse as much as it is a gift. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath, but the weight of what I had learned, the truth of the pulse, the choice that lay before me, was overwhelming. The winds whipped around me, but they didn't soothe me this time. No, this time, they felt more like the breath of the land itself, breathing down my neck, urging me to decide, to act. I could feel the spirits again, whispering in the wind. I could feel their eyes on me, their silent presence pressing in from all sides. They had been waiting for me to understand the pulse, to learn its weight. And now that I had, they were waiting for me to choose. The steppes stretched out before me, vast and endless, the darkening sky above like a canvas yet to be painted. The air was thick with the scent of dust and earth, the last light of the sun casting long shadows across the dunes. It was beautiful, but the beauty of it now felt suffocating, as though it too was waiting for me to make a move. I turned away from the horizon, facing the emptiness behind me. There was no path ahead. There was only the pulse, beating in time with my heart. Only the land, waiting for me to decide how it would change. I could feel it, the pull, the temptation to wield the power, to reshape the world in my image. The thoughts of control, of bending the land to my will, tugged at me like an unspoken promise. But then I remembered the figure's warning. If you give in to that temptation, you will lose yourself. I clenched my fists at my sides, feeling the pulse flare with a sharp jolt, a reminder of the power that surged through me, that would surge through me with each step I took. The weight of it was immense. And yet, as much as I felt its power, I also felt the land, the spirits, the voices of those who had come before. It was not a gift that could be used lightly. It was a force that demanded balance, a balance I could only understand if I learned to listen. But how? How could I learn to listen when the pulse was so powerful, so overwhelming? I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a moment, allowing the pulse to settle within me. It thrummed in my veins, deep and rhythmic, like the beating of a drum. But this time there was a shift. The sound of it became less invasive, less chaotic. Instead of pressing against me, it became a part of me, a voice that seemed to come from within, as though the pulse itself was speaking to me. "Do not fear me," it whispered. "I am the land. I am the past and the future. I am what has been and what will be. I am the bridge between all things." The voice was calm now, almost soothing, like the winds that swept across the steppes. It was not a force to be feared, but a force to be understood. I could feel it now, deep within me, its purpose, its essence. It was not something to be controlled, nor something to be ignored. It was something to be listened to. And then, just as suddenly as it had spoken, the pulse went quiet again, leaving me standing in the silence of the desert, the weight of its presence still lingering in my chest. I opened my eyes and looked out across the land, the steppes stretching out endlessly before me. The horizon was still darkening, but the pulse inside me felt different now. It was no longer a burden. It was a part of me, a part of the land. And perhaps that was the key, understanding that the pulse was not mine to control but mine to carry, to guide. I began walking again, this time with a new sense of purpose, though the weight of the choice still hung heavily on my shoulders. There was no easy answer. The land would not be shaped by one single action, one single decision. It would be shaped by the choices I made day by day, step by step. It would be shaped by how I listened to the pulse, how I understood the land, how I honored those who had come before. As I moved deeper into the steppes, the wind rose again, carrying with it a faint sound, almost like a song. It was a haunting melody, one I couldn't quite place, but it was familiar, a sound that seemed to stir something deep inside me. The pulse within me quickened in response, and I realized that the song was not just the wind. It was the land itself, the spirits of the past, all of them woven together in a single, timeless harmony. The spirits were still watching. They were waiting not just for me, but for the land itself. They had been here long before me, and they would remain long after. They were part of the pulse, part of the rhythm of the earth, and I was part of them. I felt their presence around me, felt the weight of their expectations, their hopes for what the land could become. I paused, looking out at the dunes, the vast emptiness stretching as far as the eye could see. The land was alive and I was part of it. The pulse was not a burden, nor a weapon. It was a connection, a bridge that tied all things together. And the question that remained was not whether I could carry it, but whether I could carry it wisely. Could I listen to the land? Could I listen to the pulse? The wind swept around me again, and I closed my eyes, feeling it against my skin, the familiar rhythm of the desert. The pulse thrummed softly within me, a steady beat that resonated through my bones. The song of the land was becoming clearer now, and I could hear the voices of those who had walked this path before me. We are all part of the pulse, the voices whispered. We are all part of the land. We are the past and the future, and we are waiting. I opened my eyes, and for the first time I understood. The pulse was not just about shaping the world. It was about listening to it, understanding it, feeling it, and in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I turned toward the horizon, where the last light of the sun was fading, and the stars were beginning to pierce the sky. The path ahead was unclear, but I knew one thing for certain. I was not alone. The pulse was with me, the land was with me, and the future was waiting. The night was settling around me, thick and heavy with silence. The stars above were like a scattering of diamonds, cold and distant, casting faint light on the vast, empty landscape. The pulse within me had quieted, but it hadn't gone away. It thrummed softly beneath my skin, a steady rhythm that matched the beat of my heart. It was no longer an overwhelming force. Instead, it was a part of me, like the air I breathed, the blood that ran through my veins. I walked on, the sand shifting beneath my feet, each step taking me deeper into the steppes. The wind had died down, leaving only the quiet murmur of the land in my ears. The pulse seemed to echo in the stillness, like a soft song that hummed through the desert, a rhythm that connected all things, past, present, future. The land was vast, endless in its stretch, and yet it felt smaller now, as though I could sense its heartbeat, its lifeblood, beneath the surface. I had come here seeking answers, hoping for clarity. And yet, the more I learned, the more I realized how little I truly understood. The pulse was not a thing to be mastered or controlled. It was something to be felt, to be embraced. It was not mine to bend to my will. It was a force that shaped the world, that connected the living and the dead, that bridged the gap between the past and the future. The path ahead was still uncertain, but the weight of it no longer felt as heavy. I was no longer overwhelmed by the pulse. I was learning to walk with it, to listen to it, to let it guide me instead of forcing my will upon it. The land was not a thing to be conquered. It was a thing to be understood, to be honored. And that was where my true test lay, not in the decisions I would make, not in the choices that lay before me, but in how I listened to the pulse, how I carried it, how I moved with it, not against it. I stopped for a moment, taking a deep breath, letting the cool desert air fill my lungs. I had come so far, and yet the journey was only just beginning. The pulse had chosen me, but I was beginning to realize that it was not just a force of power. It was a force of change, and change was not something that could be controlled. It was something that had to be allowed to flow, to evolve. The stars above seemed to shift in the sky, like a reflection of the pulse that beat inside me. They weren't just points of light. They were a part of the pulse. They were the pulse. They were the memories of the past, the hopes of the future, the rhythm of the world. I looked back at the dunes I had crossed, the long stretch of sand that seemed to go on forever. The path behind me had blurred, swallowed by the desert, but the path ahead was clear in its own way. It wasn't a straight line, and it wasn't a path I could control. It was winding, unpredictable, but it was mine to walk. The pulse quickened, and I could feel a presence, something just beyond my awareness. It wasn't a figure this time, not like the keeper or the dark-robed figure. No, this was something different. This was something ancient, something that had always been here, beneath the sands, beneath the sky. A presence that filled the air, that filled the land, like the silence before a storm. I turned, but there was no one there. The land was empty, still, silent. Listen. The voice came as a whisper, but it was clear and undeniable. It was not a voice from the past or the future, but something from the land itself. A voice that was ancient, as old as the steppes, as old as the pulse that ran through them. I closed my eyes, trying to calm my racing heart. The wind picked up again, swirling around me, carrying with it the faint scent of something familiar. Dust, earth, but also something else, something sharper. Something that felt like a warning. Listen to the land. Listen to the pulse. You are part of it, and it is part of you. The whisper faded, leaving only the sound of the wind, but the weight of the words lingered in the air. The land was speaking. The pulse was speaking, and I needed to listen. I opened my eyes, staring out across the steppes. The landscape had changed in subtle ways. The dunes, the horizon, it was the same, but it was different. The air felt thicker, heavier, as though something was about to happen. As though the land was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. And then I felt it. A shift, deep in the earth beneath my feet. The pulse quickened again, a wave of energy that surged up from the ground, radiating out through the sands, through the air, through me. I staggered for a moment, my vision blurring as the pulse surged violently inside me, overwhelming and intense. The land was speaking. It was no longer a whisper. It was a roar, a crashing wave of energy that swept through me, through everything. The pulse was alive, and it was more than I had ever realized. It was not just a force of life. It was a force of death, a force of destruction, a force that shaped the world, yes, but it also had the power to tear it apart. I gasped for breath as the pulse inside me twisted, like a knot tightening in my chest. It was no longer the steady rhythm I had felt before. Now it was erratic, chaotic, as if something had broken free. The land was trembling, shaking beneath my feet, the very earth alive with the force of the pulse. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the surge of energy stopped. The land stilled, the pulse settling back into its steady beat. The sand was calm again, the wind quiet, but something had changed. The air felt thick, charged with an energy I couldn't fully comprehend. The pulse inside me was different now, no longer just a connection to the land, but something more, something powerful, dangerous, alive. The choice that lay before me was clearer now. The pulse was not just a tool, not just a force of creation. It was a force of destruction as well, and I had to decide how to wield it. I looked out at the land, the vast emptiness stretching before me. The steppes had changed, and I had changed with them. The path ahead was still unclear, but I knew one thing. The pulse had spoken, and now it was up to me to listen. The future was waiting, but it would be shaped by the choices I made, by the way I chose to listen to the pulse. And I would have to walk the path carefully, because the pulse was not a force that could be controlled. It was a force that could control me if I wasn't careful. I took a step forward, the sand shifting beneath my feet. The wind picked up again, swirling around me like 1,000 voices, each one urging me onward. The pulse was with me. The land was with me. And now it was time to choose. The land stretched out before me like an open wound, the pulse within me beating in time with the rhythm of the earth itself. It was no longer just a sound, a distant whisper in my bones. It was an undeniable presence, a force that demanded attention, that sought to be understood, but also to be respected. The wind, which had been calm moments before, stirred again, carrying with it the scent of salt and dry earth, the kind of scent that clung to the skin like memories long buried. I walked, but each step felt heavier than the last. It wasn't just the weight of the land underfoot, nor the shifting sands that threatened to swallow me whole. It was the pulse that beat in my chest and in my mind, as though it were constantly tugging me toward some unseen end. Every breath I took felt filled with the knowledge that something was coming, something inevitable. The land was waiting, and I had become part of that waiting. The wind howled, picking up sand in a swirling vortex that danced and writhed in the air like an ancient spirit caught in a frenzy. It was then that I saw it, a shadow moving against the storm. It was a figure tall and thin, their silhouette, dark against the swirling sands. They moved with a strange grace, as though they were both part of the storm and separate from it, a presence that could not be contained by the chaos of the land. My pulse quickened in response, the rhythm of it syncing with the pulsing energy that emanated from the figure. I paused, standing still as the figure drew closer, their presence filling the air like a heavy weight. There was no sound to their movement, just the quiet hiss of the sand shifting beneath their feet, a whisper lost in the wind. When they were close enough, they stopped, their eyes locking with mine. Their face was obscured by a tattered veil, but their gaze, those eyes, burned with a fire that went beyond the physical realm. They seemed to pierce through me, cutting through the very fabric of my being. "You are here," the figure said, their voice not a whisper, but a command that seemed to echo from the land itself, deep and resonant, like the sound of distant thunder. "You carry the pulse." I nodded slowly, unsure of how to respond. The pulse throbbed within me, echoing in my chest, but I could not understand what they wanted from me. What did they know? What did they want me to understand? "You seek answers," the figure continued, their voice both familiar and foreign, as though they had spoken those words 1,000 times before, as though they had seen all the paths that lay before me. "You seek to understand the pulse, to wield it, to control it." I took a step forward, my heart racing in my chest. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," I said, my voice tight with the weight of my uncertainty. "I feel it. I feel the pulse. I feel the land. But I don't understand it. I don't understand why it has chosen me." The figure's gaze softened slightly, though it was still intense, like a fire that could not be extinguished. "The pulse does not choose lightly. It chooses those who can carry it, those who can feel it, but it does not guide them. It does not offer answers. It only shows." I clenched my fists at my sides. "Shows what? What does it want from me?" The figure took a step closer, their presence enveloping me, as though they were drawing the very air from my lungs. "The pulse does not desire. It does not want anything. It is a force of life and death, creation and destruction. It is everything and it is nothing. It simply exists." I swallowed hard, trying to make sense of their words, but they only added to the confusion that churned in my mind. How could something that simply existed carry so much weight? How could something that was so passive, so indifferent, change the course of everything? "And what of me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What am I supposed to do with it? What does it want me to do?" The figure's eyes bored into mine, and for a moment, I felt as if I were standing at the edge of a vast precipice, the land falling away into an abyss, the pulse deep inside me trembling like a warning. "You must decide," they said softly, their voice now carrying a thread of something ancient, something resigned. "You must decide if you will walk the path of creation or the path of destruction. The pulse will shape the world through you, whether you wish it or not." but it is your choice how it shapes you. Creation or destruction? I repeated, my voice shaking. But how can I know which path is the right one? How do I choose? The figures stepped back, their form beginning to dissolve into the desert wind, as though they were becoming part of the storm, part of the land. The right path is the one you walk, they said, their voice now fading, like an echo lost in the wind. And you will know it by how it feels. The pulse will show you in time. But first, you must feel it. And just like that, they were gone, their presence vanishing into the shifting sands, leaving me alone once more. I stood there, my breath shallow, my heart pounding in my chest. The pulse inside me thrummed louder, its rhythm a constant presence, a heartbeat that reverberated through the very core of my being. Creation or destruction. The path of the pulse was not one of certainty, not one of clear lines. It was a path that would force me to confront everything I had ever known, everything I had ever believed. The wind picked up again, swirling around me, but this time, the air felt different. The pulse had spoken through the figure, and I realized now that the land was not just waiting for me to understand. It was waiting for me to choose. The pulse would not make the decision for me. It would only show me the way, and I would have to walk it. The horizon stretched out before me, the endless expanse of sand and sky merging into one, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, that the path I chose would not just shape my fate. It would shape the fate of everything. The land, the spirits, the future, they all depended on the choices I would make. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, feeling the pulse inside me settle into its familiar rhythm. The land was alive with energy, with power. The future was wide open, but it was mine to shape. The question was no longer whether I could carry the pulse, but whether I could walk with it, whether I could learn to listen to it, and whether I could resist its temptation to take what it offered. I began walking again, each step heavy with the weight of my choice, each step echoing the pulse that beat inside me, beneath the sands, beneath the sky. The land was waiting, the future was waiting, and I had to decide. I walked on through the night, each step a quiet rebellion against the uncertainty that clung to me like the very dust beneath my feet. The pulse inside me remained constant, a low hum that resonated in my bones. It was not just the rhythm of my heart anymore, not merely the heartbeat of the land. It had become something more, something that could no longer be ignored or denied. The wind had died down, and the desert stretched out before me in perfect stillness. It was as though the land had quieted, waiting for something, waiting for me to make a final decision. There was no sound but the soft whisper of my own breath, the faint rustling of the sand shifting underfoot. I had thought the pulse was the key, the answer, but now I understood it was not. The pulse was a guide, yes, but it was also a mirror, reflecting back to me everything I had buried, everything I had denied. It didn't show me the world as I wanted to see it. It showed me the world as it was. Raw, alive, terrifying. I stopped once more, standing at the crest of a dune. The night sky was like a blanket overhead, the stars sharp and clear, their cold light washing over me. Below, the land stretched out endlessly, and I realized something. I had no real control over it. No one did. The pulse was a force of creation, yes, but it was also a force of entropy, of destruction. And that was the truth I had been avoiding all along. Creation and destruction were one and the same. I could feel the spirits, the ones who had walked this land long before me, watching from the shadows. They were silent now, no longer whispering, but present in the very air around me. They had lived through the pulse's wrath, felt its power, felt its danger. And now they were waiting for me to understand what they already knew. I placed a hand on the sand, feeling its coolness beneath my fingers. It was nothing special, nothing remarkable, just earth. And yet, in its simplicity, in its stillness, it held everything. The pulse, the land, the spirits, all of it was tied together. All of it was a part of the same force, the same eternal rhythm. Creation and destruction, life and death. The pulse didn't belong to me. It was a force that had always been here, long before I arrived, and would continue long after I was gone. I had learned that much. But what was I to do with that knowledge? The figure's words echoed in my mind. You must decide if you will walk the path of creation or the path of destruction. The choice had never been as simple as I had hoped. It wasn't about making a decision in a moment, about taking one path over the other. It was about how I lived with the pulse, how I chose to be with it every step of the way. The pulse would not simply shape the world, it would shape me. I was the vessel, the conduit, and the land would shift, but only as I allowed it to, only as I understood the consequences of every choice I made. I looked out across the steppes once more, feeling the vast emptiness settle into me, feeling the weight of the land, the weight of time itself. I felt it, everything, the past, the present, the future. All of it was in me, all of it was in the pulse. The future was a shadow of possibility, stretching out before me like an endless horizon. It was both terrifying and exhilarating, but it was mine to walk. And the truth was, I couldn't control the pulse. I couldn't control the land. But I could learn to walk with it, to listen to it, to feel it. I could learn to be with the land, to understand its balance, to honor the past while shaping the future. The path ahead wasn't clear. The winds could change at any moment. The pulse could surge again, and I would be forced to make decisions I couldn't foresee. But that was the nature of the pulse of life itself, unpredictable, fluid, in constant motion. The spirits of the land whispered again. A soft murmur carried on the wind. This time I listened closely, and I realized they weren't just warning me, they were guiding me, not toward an end, but toward a beginning, a new understanding, a new way to walk with the pulse, with the land, with the past and the future. I stood, feeling the pulse within me settle, a steady hum in my chest. It was no longer a burden, it was a partnership, a quiet understanding that I would carry forward, that I would honor, that I would listen to. The horizon before me was still dark, the night deep and endless, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't running from the pulse. I was walking with it. The wind rose again, gentle this time, and I walked on. I didn't know where the path would lead me, but I knew this. The pulse was part of me now, part of the land, part of the eternal rhythm of creation and destruction. And I would carry it with grace. As the first light of dawn began to break on the horizon, I realized that the steppes were not empty. They had never been empty. The land was full of memories, full of life, full of potential. And I too was full of the pulse, full of the land, full of the future. And as I walked, the rhythm of the pulse was no longer something I feared. It was something I embraced. The land had shown me its truth, and now it was time to walk with it. The horizon bled into shades of purple and gold, the first light of dawn kissing the edges of the sky, scattering the stars like forgotten dreams. The steppes, once an endless expanse of desolation, now seemed to pulse with a new life, a quiet, subtle energy that hummed beneath the surface. It was the pulse, of course, but it felt different now. It was no longer the raw, chaotic surge I had first felt, but something gentler, something more steady, more in tune with the rhythm of the earth itself. I could still feel it within me, its steady thrum, the echo of the land's heartbeat. The choice I had made was not a final one, not a singular turning point in time. It was a constant decision, a continuous act of listening, of walking with the pulse, rather than against it. I wasn't a master of the land, nor was I its servant. I was a part of it, a thread woven into the greater fabric, my steps aligned with the rhythm of everything that had come before and everything that would follow. I paused at the edge of a dune, the sand cool beneath my fingers. The sun was rising now, slowly, casting long shadows across the land. The light felt soft against my skin, like a promise, like the land itself was telling me that it was not done with me yet. In the distance, I could see the faint outline of a caravan, small and slow, moving against the vast expanse of desert. I watched them for a moment, recognizing the unmistakable silhouette of a wanderer. They moved with purpose, but there was a gentleness to their steps that I could feel, even from here. I wondered if they, too, carried the pulse within them, if they, too, walked with it, or if they had yet to discover it. I thought about the figure who had warned me of the pulse's power, the figure cloaked in shadow. They had spoken of creation and destruction, of the choice that lay before me, but I now understood that the pulse was not a simple matter of choosing one path or the other. It was about the balance between them, the understanding that creation could not exist without destruction, that life could not thrive without death. The pulse was both the ebb and flow of existence itself. I had seen the land shift and tremble, felt the power that surged through me. Could tear the world apart, yes, but it could also bring it back together. I could see now that the pulse was not about control, it was about respect. Respect for the land, for the spirits, for the past that had shaped everything, and for the future that would unfold no matter what I did. I stood for a long time, watching the caravan grow closer, feeling the pulse inside me steady once more, like the calm after a storm. The wind had settled, leaving behind only the soft rustle of sand, the whispers of the spirits that still lingered in the air. I could feel their presence, not as shadows, but as something more. They were a part of me now, woven into my own rhythm, the pulse that beat through the land. The caravan arrived at the foot of the dune, and a man, weathered and old, stepped forward. His face was lined with age and experience, his eyes sharp with the kind of knowing that only comes with years spent walking this land. He didn't speak at first. He only looked at me, his gaze thoughtful, measuring. "You carry the pulse," he said finally, his voice deep and gravelly, but not unkind. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words, feeling the truth in them. It was not just a statement. It was a recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the journey I had undertaken, of the path I was now walking. "I do," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm still learning." The old man nodded slowly. "The pulse is not a thing to be mastered," he said, his gaze shifting toward the horizon, where the sun was now rising in full. "It is a force of nature, and like all forces it cannot be controlled, only understood. Walk with it, and it will show you the way." He turned and began to walk toward the rest of his caravan, but then paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "There are many who come to the steppes, seeking answers," he said, his voice carrying in the morning air. "But not all of them find them. Some are consumed by the pulse. Some are swallowed whole by the land. It's easy to get lost here. Easy to forget that creation and destruction are one and the same." I felt the pulse stir within me, echoing his words, and for the first time in a long while, I understood the depth of what he was saying. The land could consume you if you weren't careful. If you tried to force it, if you tried to control it, it would swallow you whole. But if you learned to walk with it, if you listened to it, it would guide you. The old man was gone, his footsteps lost in the shifting sands, but his words lingered in my mind like the pulse itself, constant, steady, unyielding. I turned back to face the land, the vast emptiness of the steppes stretching before me. The pulse inside me was quiet now, a hum that seemed to match the rhythm of the earth beneath me. It wasn't gone. It would never be gone. But it was no longer a burden. I had accepted it for what it was, a force of life, of death, of creation, of destruction. It was both beautiful and terrible, and it was a part of me now, as it had always been. I had stopped fighting it, stopped trying to control it, and instead, I had begun to understand it, to listen to it. I stepped forward, my feet sinking into the cool sand, and as I moved, the pulse inside me seemed to settle, its rhythm syncing with the world around me, as though the land itself was walking with me. The spirits were quiet now, not gone, but at peace. They were part of the land and part of me, and as the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the steppes, I knew the journey was not over. There was still much to learn, much to understand. The future was wide open, and the pulse would continue to guide me. But it would not shape me. I would shape it through every step I took, every decision I made. And that was enough.